All right. So just a pre-word. I know it's a 3-hour video today, but the 1.4.4 balance changes had so much in them. I needed to go through all of them, and I did not want to split it up into multiple videos. So this is what we got. I'm going to do my best to timestamp every single section, although all the sections are pretty long themselves, so you still can have a section that's like 30 to 40 minutes because there's so many changes that I just go over and give my opinion on, right? So, yeah, super long video. I doubt very many people will watch this, but it really is every single change that they made balance related. So, I do hope that you enjoy if you do like that sort of thing and like, videos going over that sort of stuff. With that, we'll just get right into it. All right, welcome back to another video. This one, we're going over the balance changes, which you'll know if you watched the video yesterday, which I don't think many people are going to end up watching this one, but not the video from yesterday, unless just more people want to learn about balance changes, which might be the case, since that's kind of, I don't know, I'm more interested in the balance changes. You might not be. I don't know, bruh. Uh, so, introduction and notes from Line 4s. As the 1.4.4 update is highly focused on quality of life changes, there is naturally a substantial amount of overlap between some of these quality of life changes and balance changes. It's impossible to draw an absolutely definitive line between the two categories, and so there are going to be some duplicate entries which are present both in this section and in the main changelog. Additionally, there are some particularly balance impacting bugs which warrant being included in the balance section as well, for the sake of information being provided in the places where it is relevant. And given the significant length of the total changelog, we felt it was worth the extra clarity to include these changes in both sections of the changelog. 1.4.4 has the most extensive set of balance changes added in an update, even more so than 1.4 and 1.4.1. Furthermore, it includes some of the most technically complicated changes made to weapons and other systems, including a number of reworks and other back-end changes which alter the behavior of weapons beyond simple stat changes. Many of these changes delve into some of the more complex mechanics of Terraria's combat and weapon systems, and without taking all these mechanics into play, some of the changes made may seem confusing, backwards, or unintuitive. To help newer players get an understanding of some of these mechanics, or perhaps just as a refresher for veteran players, I've included a reference glossary of some of the core mechanics that were impacted, as well as a detailed description of the concept of piercing immunity frames, which feature heavily in many of the changes made. We've included this as a resource for reference, but it is not necessary to read for the changelog and does not include any changes itself. Feel free to skip the glossary if you'd rather get to the actual changes. Okay, I did not expect that we would actually have more balance changes than in 1.4, because 1.4 had a lot of balance changes. Like, I made 2 videos on the 1.4 balance changes, and apparently we have more balance changes. So, that's a lot of balance changes. This video may end up being an hour long. We're gonna go over all of them though. I'm not gonna split this into like 2 videos like I did in the 1.4 update, since I already have a video going over all of the changes. This might take a while though. I'm excited for it though. I really enjoy balance changes in games where a lot of things end up being skewed in balance, which is present in a game like Terraria. There's a lot of weapons that are kind of bad, a lot of weapons that are really, really good, and some that are just in the middle, right? So it's going to be cool to see what they've done. I'm going to look at the specific, piercing immunity frames concept. And I'm going to look at just that, because there's all these things that I'm pretty sure I know most of, but they called it out, so I may as well look at it. Static, local immunity, non-pure, Jesus Christ. Well, I guess I'll read this out for you guys, since I'm sure many of you don't want to do it yourself, so let's look at what immunity frames are. Overview. When an enemy is hit by a piercing projectile, a weapon, projectile, or a minion that can hit multiple enemies, that can hit multiple times, I'm going to read this so badly. The game has to use what is called immunity frames to prevent the enemy from taking damage from a projectile repeatedly every single frame, which could otherwise be as many as 60 hits per second. After hit, oh my god, I am losing it. The enemy becomes temporarily immune to being hit again, though this duration is almost always measured in fractions of a second, which is more than enough for most projectiles to move through the enemy and be on their way. Particularly slow projectiles may still hit a target multiple times, but their immunity frames prevent them from hitting every single frame, so this is within expected behavior. The amount of immune time inflicted by a projectile can be adjusted to make it hit more or less frequently. Immune frame time does not apply to non-piercing attacks, regular bullets for instance, which only hit once. Global immunity. By default, all piercing weapons in the game inflict what is called global immunity when hitting enemies. These enemies become invulnerable to all sources of piercing damage, including other types of attacks, for the duration of that period. This period is typically a default of 10 frames, 1/6 of a second, but can be changed to allow faster or slower hitting. This was the original implementation of Terraria's immune frame system, though we are shifting away from it over time. An unfortunate consequence of global immunity is that it blocks you from doing damage with different types of damage sources. Unless manually set otherwise, all piercing projectiles in the game, especially older ones, use the global immunity system. Many global immunity projectiles were balanced around this limitation, doing more damage than they might otherwise if they were not. Static immunity. Some piercing projectiles have been changed to use static immunity. This form of immunity will still induce immune time, but this immune time will only block damage from a specific type of projectile. Though repeated hits from the same type of piercing projectile during the immunity period will not be able to land, hits from any other type of projectile will be able to deal damage. Similar to global, static immunity time duration can be changed as needed. Though static projectiles will not interfere with other sources of damage, there are still scenarios where firing multiple projectiles of the same type will be counterproductive. For example, putting Jester arrows, which inflict static immunity, on Tsunami will result in only one of the piercing arrows hitting, because the enemy will be temporarily immune to Jester arrows as the other arrows pass through. Most projectiles that use static are balanced around this. Local immunity. Finally, the third type of piercing projectile behavior is called local. It will still induce immune time, but this immune time will only apply to the exact specific projectile which did the damage. This means that if you have two of the same type of summon minion using local immunity, each minion will operate on its own independent immune timer, and they will not conflict with each other at all, nor will they block damage from any other sort of piercing damage. Local projectiles will never interfere with your ability to land hits with other projectiles, nor will firing large quantities of a local projectile be inefficient or fail to land hits. However, because the system was not usable for the majority of the game's history, almost all piercing weapons were not balanced around it. Because local projectile damage allows for very rapidly scaling damage, changing weapons which currently use global or static to use local often results in excessive damage boost. As a result, local is only used in specific circumstances when the boost is acceptable, with new equipment, or with weapons that are being entirely reworked. Simply changing everything to use local would require tremendous reworks to many of the weapons in the game. Non-piercing. Technically not a fourth type, projectiles which do not pierce, which is to say they disappear immediately upon hitting the enemy the first time, are not subject to any of the above systems. They will always deal their damage immediately without a period of immune frames, as there is no reason for them to use such a system. They are also not impacted by the immune frame time inflicted by other types of piercing projectiles. Okay, that was probably a absolute shit show for you guys to hear. That's not really a shit show, that's a shit sound. I don't know. I'm out of it, dude. But I was stuttering over everything. I can't read things. What? Like, this is why I could never narrate books, because I could just straight up could not do it. It's painful, I know, but it is what it is. So, that is immunity frames. That took it's 9 minutes into the recording. That might not even make it in. We'll see. Moving on though, global mechanics changes. We're just gonna look at this. So mechanics that got changed. Defense penetration got a bug fix. They fixed a bug where combining more than one source of defense penetration would cause extra phantom damage above the base damage of the weapon. This applies to weapons with built-in defense penetration, Iker, Betsy's Curse, and Sharpening Station. I have no idea what phantom damage is. I assume that's something that I've experienced before when using some sort of defense penetration. Static immunity frames last hit. All piercing projectiles that use static immunity no longer apply immunity on their final hit if they are a projectile which expires after enough pierces. This has very little impact on previously existing static immunity projectiles, but is important for several projectiles which are being changed to use static instead of global. Global immunity projectiles already do this, so this change was made to account for some projectiles which were being changed from global to static so that they did not receive an accidental damage nerf. Okay. The buff/debuff caps, which I think we did look at in the last video, the players can get buffs or debuffs, or can get a maximum of 44 buffs and debuffs as opposed to 22 that was present before. And the enemy debuff maximum is increased from 5 to 20. So you can get more debuffs, more buffs on yourself, and the enemies can take more debuffs at the same time. Post-death invincibility. Duration increased from 1 to 3 seconds. What does that mean? Post-death invincibility? As in, like, when you come back to life? It's kind of weird. I don't know what exactly that could mean. We have bosses. Oh my god. Oh my god, this is just the bosses. Holy shit. The King Slime now takes up more enemy slots, reducing or outright eliminating additional enemy spawns during his fight. Note that his minions already took up enemy spawn slots, so this was already unlikely once the fight was in full swing. This does not impact Slime Rain spawns. So if it's just like King Slime, you're not going to get like a bird falling out of the sky to hit you in the face, which doesn't happen in Terraria, but it could, and that's what that would prevent from happening. The Brand of Cthulhu got a buff, I guess warranted since it's always been garbage, and maybe now more warranted since its item that it gives you is no longer garbage, which they changed in 1.4. The health increased from 1,000 to 1,250, 5% knockback resistance added across all difficulties. Expert/master illusions now become opaque much faster. There's now a safe range around the player during phase 1 to prevent the Brand of Cthulhu from teleporting directly on top of you, though it can still be extremely close. No longer has a map icon during phase 2. Oh, that actually does make it significantly harder. That's an interesting change that you can't get teleported on anymore. So it's harder to see it faster, and you cannot use the mini-map in order to see it anymore, which is actually huge for the fight. And also we got a 25% HP boost, which is big still. So that's big. I know I've already spoiled most stuff, but I think I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible from now on and just slowly move down the so the screen instead of just showing everything to you. The Deer Clops now takes up more enemy slots, reducing or outright eliminating enemy spawns during his fight. So it looks like they're doing this sort of thing with multiple bosses, which is making it so that enemies do not spawn. So it's kind of adding the boss Zen effect in a way that, you know, Calamity mod has, which is a huge thing in that mod that I really love. So I think that's great that they're doing that. The Wall of Flesh got a nerf. The Hungries no longer gain a third stat bonus after 25% of the Wall of Flesh, or after 25% Wall of Flesh health. They will continue to use the second stat bonus from 50% Wall of Flesh health for the remainder of the fight. The Wall of Flesh's tongue debuff, pull speed, now scales with the boss's speed and expert and master to prevent the wall from moving faster than it pulls you in at the end of the fight. So, okay, that's cool. It doesn't seem like that's gonna massively affect the fight, because like the damage generally, most of it is not coming from the Hungry. Most of it, you're not usually getting wrecked by the wall moving faster at the end of the fight. Although the fact that it could move faster than it pulls you in at the end of the fight could be like is very weird when that does happen, because it does happen from time to time. It's good that they changed that, since that seems kind of like more of a like just unintended side effect of how. However the movement speed scaled than anything that like actually that they wanted. So that's good. The Queen Slime got a nerf. I didn't know that she was that difficult to begin with, but apparently she needed a nerf. Maximum flight speed and acceleration in phase 2 have been reduced by about 15%, so she flies flies slower. The Queen Slime's minion projectile damage is reduced by the amount you see. These same projectiles now generate some light to be more visible at night, so I guess that could be kind of annoying if they're just hitting you and you can't see them. Now it takes up more enemy slots, reducing or outright eliminating additional enemy spawns during his fight. I don't know why it says his fight. That's supposed to be a female. It has queen in the name. And then it says, note that her minions already took up enemy spawn slots, so this was already unlikely once the fight was in full swing. So, dual gender boss, clearly. Plantera, no buff or nerf tag. Increased the distance before despawn timer begins ticking down dramatically. What does that mean? Note, Plantera has a despawn distance and a timer. The despawn timer resets if she re-enters active range. This change increases the active range substantially. It is still possible to despawn her via evasion and distance, but should be much more difficult to do so by accident. So that kind of explains it. That's still a very weird mechanic that Plantera has, though. But okay, so it's going to be harder to despawn, basically. So if you're moving away from it, it's going to be more difficult to despawn, basically, what I literally just said. So I don't know, that doesn't really ever happen to me, but I'm sure that it is annoying when it does happen. I'm sure it has happened to me before, so you know, it's good that they're changing that up a little bit. Golem got buffs. The golem body health was increased from 9,000 to 15,000. The golem head increased from 16k to 25k, and the fists increased from 7k to 10k. Now charges its punches with a visual effect for half a second before firing them. Golem's fists can no longer be deflected. Now takes up more enemy slots, blah blah blah, so enemies won't spawn during the fight. So, Golem is actually going to be a boss now, and not just something you can just run over. I'm pretty sure similar changes like this were made in like Calamity as well, where you can't deflect the fists and stuff. Although it is good that they're giving them a visual effect so that they don't just, you know, lash out at you and you're like, oh, it's coming at my face, and you just get punched because you can't deflect it. You can see when it's going to be coming, so you know when you need to be dashing and stuff. But I mean, that's massive. I mean, those HP buffs are huge, and now that the fists can't be deflected, you can't just freely basically not get hit by anything and only worry about the fireballs and stuff. So that's going to be a way harder boss fight. That's going to be very interesting to try out. It's going to be very difficult now, I would imagine, in comparison. But we'll have to see. That's good, though. It's good that they buffed up Golem, because he's been really bad for, like, the longest time. He's just been, like, the easiest boss in the game, almost. One of them, at least. Especially for a hard mode boss. So, cool. I do like that. Although I think it's going to be a pain in the ass to beat him now, but you know, it's not supposed to be a cakewalk, especially in like expert mode. Duke Fishron got a buff, which I don't know if that's necessary or was necessary, but that's what they did to him. The health scaling, I just skipped a line. The health was increased from 50,000 to 60,000. The health scaling factor in expert and master was increased from 1.6 times to 1.65 times. Jesus, man. So Duke Fishron ends up with 99,000 health in master mode now in comparison to 76,500. Jeez, he ends up with a lot more in expert mode too. Good lord, it's gonna be so much harder to take him out. He's already fairly difficult anyways, and they made him way harder. He's now invincible immediately after being summoned and during his phase transitions, so you can't just burst him down when he's doing his transitions, which makes sense for a harder boss fight, right? Fix an issue where the Cthulhu Nado would sometimes instantly spawn on the player and hurt them unavoidably. It should now spawn a certain distance below the player if there's no floor or platforms directly below, allowing the player time to avoid it. So, you know, that's good. That's kind of just like a bug almost. When enraged, Duke Fishron is much faster and fires more frequent and faster Cthulhu Nados. So, he's a lot harder to kill, basically, in like all ways. He doesn't do more damage or anything, but he's a lot harder to kill, and you won't get Cthulhu Nados spawning on your face. The Empress of Light, they fixed an issue where the Empress of Light would sometimes teleport directly on top of the player after an attack, and it now takes up many more enemy slots, outright eliminating enemy spawns during her fight. However, if you exit her effective spawn prevention range during the fight, enemies may spawn during the lapse of enemy slot coverage. So that's an interesting exception, because you can run far enough away from her, potentially. And then so like, you know, it's like another kind of almost bug. So the boss won't teleport onto you, which is kind of stupid. So it's good that that does not happen anymore. Dope, right? And then, like you just saw, because I flicked down, the Daytime Empress of Light, Skeletron Prime, and the Dungeon Guardian are now buffed. Instant kill attacks can no longer be avoided by dodge procs, such as Hallowed Armor or Master Ninja Gear. So it's especially the Daytime Empress is going to be a lot more dangerous. Like, holy moly, I know that dodge proc armor is what you use to fight that, and you fight it because you get a special item from her, right? If you beat her during the day, you need to now truly fight her and take 0 hits in order to survive. And then that's not really a huge thing for Skeleton Prime, and the Dungeon Guardian, except for like Dungeon Guardian cheese. But you can't avoid the insta kills anymore. So I mean, that makes sense, although it's going to make especially something like the Daytime Empress of Light a lot more difficult, but that is just what it is, right? We have a buff for the Lunatic Cultists. The health scaling factor in Expert and Master mode increased from 1.5 to 1.25 to 1.5, so more HP in the long run, as you can see. In the long run, that doesn't mean anything in this context, dude. He has more HP. And Ancient Light projectiles are no longer instantly killed, but actually take some damage to kill and will be targeted by homing projectiles, soaking up some of your damage. Okay, but did they give him a treasure bag yet? Probably not. Finally, we have a nerf for the Moonlord. The Phantasmal Sphere damage is reduced by 20%, and the Phantasmal Sphere hitbox size is reduced slightly. So they just nerfed one of his attacks. And then he will now always drop 2 non-identical weapons. And I don't know if I've ever gotten an identical weapon from him, as in like 2 of the same weapon. I don't know if that's ever happened, but I guess it could happen, and that is frustrating if it does happen. So that is a good change. So, because I mean, you never want to get duplicate items from the same boss loot bag, right? Like that's just dumb. Anyways, we're 25 minutes into this, and I've only gone through the bosses, so we're gonna keep going. We have enemies, threats, and invasions for the next balance changes. Nerfs for projectile reflecting enemies like large mimics and Selenians. Reflected projectiles now only deal half the damage to the player, and they no longer scale and deal extra damage in Expert and Master mode. I mean, that's good, so you don't get like one shot by your own projectiles, which can happen, and that's a dumb mechanic. So cool stuff. Teleporting enemies got a nerf, like casters, chaos elementals, and nebula floaters. The protection radius around the player, preventing them from teleporting directly onto you, has been increased substantially. So yeah, again, like with some of the bosses, no teleporting onto your face. The game will now also take your speed and direction into account when you're moving, and will further attempt to prevent these enemies from spawning directly in your path without time to react. However, the system is not absolute and only gives some extra distance, so it is still possible to crash into a recently teleported enemy if you do not alter course or are moving very fast. The protection radius around the player is even higher for Chaos Elementals and Nebula Floaters due to their not being stationary. Lifeform Analyzer rarities. A number of enemies rare enough to show up on the Lifeform Analyzer have had their rarity levels changed to give proper priority based on enemies which they coexist with. For example, Die Beetles have been reduced to rarity 1, so that any higher rarity enemy will take priority on the display. Voodoo Demons are also now listed on the Lifeform Analyzer. We've got a Pumpkin Moon and Frost Moon rework. The Pumpkin Moon can now go up to Wave 20. Waypoint requirements for Waves 15 through 20 match the Frost Moon. Pumpkin Moon's wave composition has been completely rearranged to account for this. The bosses are now capped in numbers, more closely resembling the behavior of Frost Moon bosses, so you can't get like a billion, what do you call them? Pumpkins, right? Which is what happens, right? You just get a million pumpkins, and it's just like a trillion fucking Christmas trees on the ground. That's not the right thing. Not the Christmas trees. The morning wood. Those, you get a lot of those, and they just, you get so many bosses in the Pumpkin Moon, so that doesn't happen anymore. Increase the number of enemy slots taken up by Morningwood and Pumpkin to be more in line with Frost Moon bosses, dramatically reducing how many can spawn at one time. So that probably has something to do just with the bosses being capped as well. All regular enemies in the Pumpkin/Frost Moon now have low per player health scaling and Expert Master multiplayer. The boss units already had scaling. Okay. Pumpkin Moon trophies now drop using Frost Moon drop rates instead of dropping from 100% of wave 15 kills. That's kind of weird that was how that worked. Pumpkin Moon boss drop rate by wave multiplier has been reduced, though drops are still more common than Frost Moon levels. This is partly to account for having a higher wave cap, though drops are still slightly less common than before. Both Pumpkin Moon and Frost Moon's expert drop bonus modifier has been reduced slightly, with the base drop rates being increased by the same amount. The end result is that classic mode drops are slightly more generous, while expert drops stay the same. Both Pumpkin Moon and Frost Moon now receive a 2.5 times point multiplier when playing in Master mode. Previously, they received a 2 times multiplier in expert, but no additional gain in Master. Bug fixes: they fixed Flocko and Krampus not giving wave progression for the Frost Moon, and fixed a very old bug where Frost Moon waves 2, 3, and 4 required way too few points to complete. Those are interesting things that I didn't know were a thing, like the bugs, but I guess they were there, so maybe you'll notice something one of these days relating to that. They reworked the Poltergeist, which can now fly freely into the air, not just on the ground. The health was reduced from 2k to 1250. The Pumpkin Moon wave progression points increased from 8 to 10. Due to the increased number present in the event, increased the kill count needed for a banner. So these are, obviously, Poltergeist is, they're doing, or these are the Pumpkin Moon and Frost Moon enemies. They buffed the Splinterling. The health was increased from 900 to 1200. Due to increased number present in the event, the increased the kill count needed for a banner. Reduced the base Spooky Wood drop count, due to the increased number of Splinterlings killed per Pumpkin Moon. However, due to faster point gain in Expert/Master, they now have bonus drop quantities in Expert and Master. Cool. Hellhound got a buff. The increased the health from 1200 to 1800. Pumpkin Moon wave progression points increased from 4 to 5. And the banner count was changed. Or the kill count needed for a banner was changed. The Headless Horseman got a buff. Health reduced from 10,000 to 5,000. Can now fire a pumpkin projectile at the player. The Pumpkin Moon wave progression points increased from 25 to 50. Now has the same health scaling as Pumpkin and Morning Wood in Expert/Master multiplayer. So it's kind of more like a proper mini boss within the event, right? It's still not really a mini boss. It doesn't have the HP or the specialties of a mini boss, but it has a mini boss like or boss like health scaling, and then has some new stuff, so kind of cool. The Morning Wood got a buff. The health was increased from 1200 to 1400. The defense was increased from 28 to 34. Increased the number of enemy slots taken to be more in line with the Frost Moon bosses, reducing how many can spawn at a time. Reduced the base Spooky Wood drop count. However, due to the faster point gain in Expert/Master, they have bonus drop quantities in Expert and Master. Pumpkin got a buff. The health was increased from 22k to 26k. Defense increased from 36 to 40. And they reduce how many can spawn at one time. So he's just a little harder to kill. And then they don't spawn as much. The Old One's Army got a change, not a buff or a nerf. The Ethereal Lightning bugs now spawn in Old One's Army Tier 3, Wave 6 instead of Wyverns. The Eternia Crystal now has 2 times as much health on Expert and 3 times as much health on Master, which is a good change and a sensible change if the enemies have stronger stats on the different difficulties, which I assume they do. So the crystal will survive a little longer and not just get nuked by a couple enemies like it tends to do, or at least won't get nuked as fast, which is just something that I have noticed before, and I don't really think about it, but since the crystal doesn't actually or didn't actually scale HP, it, you know, that's just what happens. So I like that change, although it doesn't really impact much. The Martian Saucer, they increased the hitbox size of the core in Phase 2, and that's the only change for the Martian Saucer. Next, we have a slight rework for Dread Nautilus. The charge attack has less tracking and a wider turning radius, meaning it is easier to avoid. Projectiles are now no longer blocked by tiles, and they are more lit up / visible at night. So that last one I like because I think you can only fight Dread Nautilus at night, and The projectiles, I guess you can't cheese it by hiding behind blocks. And then I guess one of its attacks, the charge attack, was a little obnoxious in some ways, so you can avoid it easier now. So, cool. I don't actually have very many opinions on that because I never actually fought Dread Nautilus that much. They nerfed the Blood Squid, reducing its health from 1,000 to 7,500. 7,500, that's not a reduction. 750. Projectile damage is reduced from 100 to 70, and they're more lit up and visible at night. So I do like that they're making the projectiles a little easier to see, since these are like nighttime enemies and bosses. Was the Blood Squid a mini boss, or was it one of the like... I guess it was just one of the like hard mode enemies that you can just pull up out of the water, right? Dread Nautilus is the boss that you can pull out of the water of the Blood Moon, and the Blood Squid, I'm pretty sure anyways, is one of the hard mode enemies that you can pull up, since there's only 2 in pre-hard mode, and that's the Wandering Eye Squid, or whatever the hell it was called, and the Merman, I think it was. The Hemogoblin Shark, the only change is that projectiles are more lit up and visible at night. So again, another change I do like. I think it's just good change, making it a little easier to actually fight with the boss. Or I don't think that the Hemogoblin Shark's not a boss, right? It's just an enemy, but easier to fight with. Don't have to get, BS by projectiles that you can't see, because that's never fun. Clowns got a nerf, and for some reason there's a lot of changes for clowns. The damage of Chattering Teeth Bomb reduced from 200 to 120. Damage of Happy Bombs reduced from 160 to 1200. Happy Bombs now glow, making them easier to see. Chattering Teeth Bombs now have a sound effect when spawned, and occasionally played passively, helping the player to be aware of them. Clown's drop pool has also been overhauled. It's now the sole source of the KO cannon, having a 1.5 chance to drop it. Bananarang drop rate has been increased from 1 in 30 to 1 in 10. There's other changes to Bananarangs, I guess, which we're going to have to see. The Bloody Teardrop rate increased from 1 in 100 to 1 in 10, like other uncommon Blood Moon enemies, so you can resummon the Blood Moon easier. So clowns have always kind of been easy to deal with, but they are very obnoxious when you're at like half HP and you get hit by a bomb and die instantly. So I do like the change, because the bombs can be kind of hard to see in the darkness, and they do a lot of fucking damage. So good changes. I didn't realize that they even had 2 bombs though, honestly, so that's just interesting information. But big nerf to the clowns, and they have some drop rate differences. We have Antlion Larvae, which got nerfed. The defense was reduced by half, from 4 to 2. The health was reduced from 35 to 30, and their max speed was slightly reduced, particularly when jumping. I kind of like this one, and I get it, because the Antlion Larvae are a pain in the ass. I never played, I didn't play 1.4 that much, but I do remember exploring the underground desert a lot in pre-hard mode, and the Antlion Larvae are just absolute menaces, dude. I hate those things, and I'm glad that they got nerfed. Screw the Antlion Larvae. Well deserved. We have Giant Antlion Chargers and Giant Antlion Swarmers, which both got defense reductions from 22 to 16 and 18 to 12. So they're easier to kill, which I think is just... I think they're trying to nerf the early game power of the underground desert a little bit. Because, when these things show up, when you're like right next to an underground desert and you're just trying to, chill out and explore a little bit, they kind of just body you. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense why they're changing them up a little bit and making them a little easier to kill. Even if it's not like right at the beginning of pre-hard mode, even after you get a couple of weapons and you go into the underground desert, like some of the enemies are still really, really difficult for being a biome that is like right there, like very close to you, or it generally is very close to you in comparison to like a lot of the other ones. It's closer to the surface, like everything is kind of closer, and then it can also just spawn right next to you if you spawn right next to a desert, right? So I don't know, I think it's cool. Let's see, is there anything else? Yeah, we got tomb crawlers and dune splicers. I don't know why why they're separately. Oh, it's because it's like it's just a blanket term for both of them. Okay. So Tomb Crawler specifically got a nerf that the defense of body segments is reduced and the defense of the tail segment is reduced 16 to 12 and 20 to 14. I didn't know the tail segment had a higher defense than the body segment, but that's interesting. But they're easier to kill now. And Tomb Crawlers and Dune Splicers have reduced spawn rates and have a further reduction in spawn rates at the upper levels of the desert. So I kind of like that because it's like the worst thing when you drop into the underground desert and you instantly just get like jumped on by a goddamn Tomb Crawler or a Dune Splicer, depending on which stage of the game you're in. Like, they're so annoying. So that's a good change as well. Rolling Cacti got a nerf. Their damage was reduced from 90 to 70, so they don't just roll on you and like kill you immediately like they do a lot of the time. Or, well, I mean, they still kind of do. I mean, 90 to 70 is still a lot of damage, but it's a little less damage. So they're just not as killer as they used to be. So good stuff. Let's see, what do we got next? We got Jellyfish, a buff for Jellyfish. Expert Electric Shock Attack now applies to projectile contact weapons, spears, short swords, solar eruption, sleepy octopod, sky dragon's fury, and whips. Slight buff for the Jellyfish makes them actually immune to these specific weapons, like they should be, which I always assumed that they were. So that's cool, I guess. Just a weird, like, specific interaction with these specific weapon types that I never knew existed. Snowflynxes, they now have more consistent spawn rates on ice and snow. Previously, it was incapable of spawning on snow or ice under most conditions. That's weird. Where the hell did they spawn then? Where did they spawn? Did they spawn on, like, slush? What? Because the only thing that's in snow biomes is just, like, ice and snow and, like, water. Wow, that's bizarre. Okay, I guess that's a change, though. Lost Girls, instead of their spawn rate decreasing in hard mode, it stays the same the entire game. This means that their hard mode spawn rate has changed from 1 in 200 to 1 in 80, and their base drop value was reduced from 5 gold to 2 gold. So less money, and they spawn more often in hard mode. Interesting tweak. We have Bone Serpent buffs, which I guess are necessary. Bone Serpents are kind of crap. The damage of all of their segments was increased. The defense of all of their segments were increased, or no, just head and body. The tail was changed, or the tail remains the same. The health was increased from 250 to 300, and they move faster, which I think is probably going to be the main thing, because the Bone Serpents are really slow, so you can always see them coming and kill them really fast. And they get further stat bonuses specifically on For the Worthy and Everything Seed. That is a weird specificity for Bone Serpents in specific, unless there's other enemy changes, which I guess we'll see, that have to do with For the Worthy and Everything Seed. The Rune Wizard has an increased spawn rate, so you can find him more often, which makes getting his special items more easy, which, you know, that's good. You don't, like, I know that going and finding, like, the Rune Wizard and Tim can be, like, a pain in the ass sometimes, because they just have a really low spawn rate, so, you know, I don't mind a change like that. Rock Golems got a nerf. They now throw rocks less frequently, and the rocks move a little slower as well. Their spawn rate was reduced. Their money drop value was reduced by half, from 5 to 2.5. And Rock Golem head drops twice as often to account for the rarity change. Giant fungi bulbs got a nerf. They will no longer fire at you if they do not have line of sight. That's a change that makes sense. The projectiles can no longer move through walls and will break on impact with blocks. So they can't just shoot at you through walls, which, like, yeah, that's really stupid. Gastropods got a nerf. They have some built-in inaccuracy when firing, reducing their likelihood of hitting the player from long distances. So that's a thing. I never really had an issue with gastropods, but I guess that, you know, having aimbot is not cool. The Cursed Hammer and Crimson Axe got a buff. Fixed a long-standing inconsistency with their spawn code that resulting in them being dramatically rarer than enchanted swords. They should be about as common as enchanted swords now, particularly notably with Crimson Axes, which were impacted more severely by the inconsistency. I guess they spawned less often. I don't know. I never see any of those enemies, so they spawn more often now. Desert Spirits got a nerf. Their projectile damage was reduced. Desert Spirits are those the ones that show up when the sandstorms happen? Let me actually look it up really quick. No, so they're like these djinn looking guys. I don't really ever see these. So I don't know. I don't know if that is like a justified nerf or buff. But these guys got nerfed. They do less damage now, so that's a thing. I guess, I mean, these are pretty high numbers, so the damage nerf kind of makes sense if they're just hitting you with a projectile and you're like, oh, well, there goes all my health. That's kind of dumb. They now don't do that as much. Next, we got the Jungle Creeper, which the defense was reduced from 40 to 28. The Jungle Creeper is that the spider? I'm pretty sure that's the spider. I don't know if that's hard mode or pre-hard mode, but I guess it's easier to kill now, the Jungle Creeper. Moss Hornets now have a chance to drop stingers. I don't know why they didn't before. That's kind of weird, but they do now. That just makes sense. Necromancers and Ragged Casters got a nerf. They now have a grace period over a second after teleportation before they begin firing, which is the same as what Diabolists always had, so they can't just fire and then shoot you immediately, which, sure. Celestial Pillars. Expert and Master Worlds no longer have an increased Celestial Pillar kill requirement. They need 100 now, like classic difficulty worlds. Upon defeating the Moonlord, Lunar Pillars now require only 50 kills to lower the Pillar Shields. Applies in all difficulties. So, you don't need to kill as many enemies to lower the Pillar Shields after you've killed the Moonlord the first time. And they're a little easier to drop the shields in expert mode and master, so it kind of seems like a nerf, but it's just listed as a base change. It just makes it a little easier to get through the pillars, right? So I don't think that's bad at all. Don't think it's that much of an issue though. The Crawltopedes got nerfed, which, I mean, yeah, the Crawltopedes are freaking difficult to deal with if you don't know how to do it right, so kind of makes sense. The head damage is reduced from 150 to 120, and the body damage from 100 to 80, so it doesn't just, chunk your HP as much. Solar Corites got nerfed. Their spawn rate was reduced by half. They should no longer charge at the player from significantly off screen. Now have a brief wind-up animation before they're charged, giving more notice, and the charge speed is slightly slower. So they're, like, easier to react to, pretty much, is what I'm getting from that. Nebula Floaters got a nerf. They have a 0.5 second delay after teleportation, during which they cannot fire. Counter teleportation chance reduced from 1 in 4 to 1 in 6. What is counter teleportation? When they get hit, they teleport? Didn't know that was a mechanic, but it happens less often now. The maximum number of active Nebula Floaters at any one time increased from 2 to 3. And the spawn rate of Nebula Floaters has been doubled, though they cannot exceed their unit cap. So they spawn more often, but they can only go up to 3. Nebula Predictors, the maximum number of them at any one time increased from 2 to 3. Nebula Brain Sucklers, the spawn rate has been reduced by 40%. Unlike other Nebula enemies, Brain Sucklers have no unit cap, and so will still be the most common enemy unit overall. This change helps ensure that a decent number of other units are spawning up to their unit cap regularly, with the remaining spawns being Brain Sucklers. The Vortex Alien Queen got a rework. Walk and chasing speed increased significantly and projectile speed reduced. That kind of just seems like changes and not a rework, but I could be wrong. Oh, it's because the alien larvae have something, like they're part of the queen, right? Now included in the Alien Queen's family cap. For context, the game has a cap on how many alien hornets and alien queens could be in play to prevent evolving queens from becoming too numerous. However, larvae were not part of that cap, and so could spawn and evolve up into hornets/queens normally, eventually creating overwhelming numbers. After this change, alien larvae simply won't spawn on queen death once this internal limit is reached. Vortex portals, both hornet portals and vortexian portals, now makes a more distinct sound when spawning, giving the player notice that it is present. Vortexian portals make a more pronounced sound when firing, again to give audio feedback about the threat. I don't have like anything to show which enemies these are and what effects all of these are. So you might not know what they all are, so this might be a little confusing, but it's just like what it is, right? I don't know what any of this is either. Not That's not true. I know what a lot of it is, but I don't know what all of it is specifically. Storm Diver got a buff, improved its air mobility to better keep up with the player, widened its firing angle, firing rate dramatically increased, minimum delay before the first shot is reduced, projectile speed increased, one of its projectiles is always accurate, and added a visual effect just prior to firing to give advanced warning to the player. So, you now know when it's about to shoot, and that's warranted because it's a lot more dangerous. I don't know which enemy that is specifically, but like, goddamn, that's a lot of changes. Stargazers. Beam now has a half-second charge-up beam effect, giving players a chance to react and avoid the incoming beam of damage. The actual duration of the damage period remains the same. Let's see. And then the last two things are large Stardust cells, which got a buff. The knockback resistance is increased from 50% to 70%, and they're now faster when chasing the player. And Milky Way Weavers got a buff, and their movement speed is increased by 50%. They periodically stop chasing to spawn a new Stardust enemy after a few seconds of charging. So, wow, that was a lot. Holy shit. That was our mechanics and bosses and enemies portion of the balance changes. And now we have all this other stuff. I'm going to go through all of it. I do want to do all of it in one video. It's going to end up being a very long video. I said an hour, like maybe in the last video or at the beginning of this one, I don't remember. And this might end up being like 2 hours or 2.5, 3 hours of stuff, because it's a lot of reading. Melee weapons next. So, like, I mean, like, look at this. Look, there's so many changes. Oh my god, just for melee weapons. Oh my god. This is gonna take so long. But we're gonna do it. We're gonna make it through everything. Everything. Okay, all broadswords. All broadsword class melee weapons, this also includes pickaxes, axes, hammers, ham axes, now use local immunity frames on hit. Very notably, this means that projectile swords will no longer block their own piercing projectiles from hitting a target at point-blank range. It will also result in more consistent hitting when mixing multiple sources of damage, piercing minions and swords, for example. So, better changes for swords. Flails got a buff, all flails. Knockback when spinning flails has been increased from 25% to 35% of normal knockback, and spinning flails now hit up to 4 times a second instead of 3 times a second. Flails which already hit 4 times a second have been increased to 5 times a second. So there should be a general increase in damage, and they do a little more knockback, so they keep enemies away from you more efficiently when you're swinging them around. So that's good. Flails got a huge rework, which was really cool in 1.4, but they still were not, you know, all that effective. But I mean, certainly way better than they were before that, because they were just hot trash before 1.4, and they actually have some sort of application within that now. But the buff, I think, is pretty warranted, and, you know, solid buff. I'm not actually going to read all of this. I'm going to tell you right now. It looks like all of the broadswords here have gotten damage buffs, use time reduction buffs, so you use them faster, they deal a little more damage, and some of them are larger, if not all of them. Some of them have higher knockback. I'm just looking through all of them right now, and the modifiers are different. Like, some of them are changed differently. If you want to look at this, just pause the video and you can read through all of them. We have, you know, all these other swords too. I'm just gonna scroll down here. It seems like, I mean, all the changes are the same, right? They're just overall buffing the broadsword type weapons, which is what all of these are. Cactus, wooden, boreal sword, palm mahogany, ebonwood, all the same kinds of buffs: damage, use time, knockback, size. We have a couple of boomerang buffs as well. The damage was increased. The damage, I said the damage and then the damage. The damage was increased for both of them. The use time is increased from a certain amount to a certain amount, which decreases short range DPS but does not impact long range distance DPS. So, I mean, it should be an overall DPS buff, right? Because their damage got buffed. So that is what it is. And then we have similar changes for the zombie arm and the bone sword as to the other broadswords. The Bat got a damage buff, which is not the issue with the Bat. The Bat is still going to be garbage, I think. I remember rating it as like one of the only F tier items, I think, in the Don't Starve Together items tier list that I made. So that's just that, you know, it is what it is. The Shroomerang, increased damage, use time increase. The drop rate is 1 in 40 now instead of 1 in 100, so it drops more frequently from enemies. The Ice Boomerang, damage was increased. It now has an increased... what? What did I just try to say? I don't even know. It now has a chance to inflict Frostburn, so that's pretty cool. It now can debuff enemies. The use time increase. It seems like this is going to be a universal thing among boomerangs. Among. Is that what I said? I don't know. My brain is dying. The Gladius got a buff. I have no idea what the Gladius even is. I assume it's a sword. The knockback was increased massively, and the drop rate was increased as well. The purple clubberfish does a lot more damage and does more knockback. The tentacle spike does more damage, and the use time was reduced a little bit, so it's a little bit better. I think the tentacle spike was already decent as it was, but it's nice that I got a little buff because it's not that good. The Falcon Blade is way bigger. Not way bigger. I thought that said 1.75. That would actually be like massive. It's just a little bit bigger, the Falcon Blade. Mandible Blade, more damage, more size. Storm Spear, the damage was increased from 12 to 14, and the projectile damage was increased from 1.25x to 1.5x of base damage, so it just does a lot more damage overall, which is kind of cool since I think the Storm Spear is interesting concept, but if you get it anywhere other than the very beginning of the game, it's kind of not that great. The Trident generates light when swung underwater, which is kind of cool. I know that the Trident also got buffs in 1.4 so that you can like use it better underwater. Like it gives you underwater movement speed, which is really cool. So just better underwater item now. Katana has similar sword buffs. I'll just call them sword buffs. Candy Cane Sword got sword buffs. Fruitcake Chakram got a damage increase. The Bladed Glove got a damage increase. The Bloody Machete got a damage increase. The Light's Bane got a little rework. It generates a short-range diagonal slash of darkness every time the sword is swung, dealing half of the base damage of Light's Bane, which I believe Light's Bane is the corruption or the demonite weapon, right? The demonite sword. So I think that's pretty cool, honestly. It turns into a weapon, right? Light's Bane. It turns into Knight's Edge. Is that what it is? I'm pretty sure it's a part of Knight's Edge. So that's pretty cool. This might actually have some use now. It's actually going to be interesting, at least. The Blood Butcherer got changed, which is the Crimtane version of the Light's Bane. It now uses a system very similar to the Tentacle Spike. Every successful strike on an enemy applies a stack of Blood Butchered, a short-lived damage over time effect. Each of these stacks are signified by a gout of blood spouting forth from the enemy. Gross, but kind of cool. It can stack up to 5 times. Each deals 4 damage over time, allowing for the maximum of 20 damage over time. That does not explain anything. What is damage over time? Is damage over time a blanket term? Is DOT like damage per second? Like, over time is so vague. Why is that the way that they chose to say that? And it lasts for 9 seconds before expiring. So the Blood Butcher is going to be way better as well. The damage is the same and it has an effect now. That's very cool. The Rotted Fork has a damage increase and now generates a shockwave at the end of the spear, which increases its effective range. This shockwave also scales in size with melee speed, so you can now expect more pronounced melee speed benefits for the Rotted Fork. Man, these are cool changes for these items, man. I really want to try them. And cool and warranted as well, because these items are just so underused by like everyone because they're just boring, they're bad, and like it's just cool that they're getting some love. I really like that. Phase Blades of all colors got a slight damage increase and the use time is reduced, so they'll just deal a bit more damage. Star Fury got a buff. Stars now fall 25% faster And Star Fury will now fall through blocks until reaching the player's cursor, unless the cursor is pointing into a solid block, in which case it will fall to the nearest open air block. It should generally fall more often and more reliably through blocks compared to before. Didn't it not? No, it only fell through platforms and didn't really fall through solid blocks, or not consistently as said. So now you can use it underground, which is, good, because before you basically couldn't use Star Fury underground. It just wasn't helpful. The star is easier to hit because it'll fall faster now, and it's gonna look different as well, which I think was mentioned somewhere else in like the quality of life changes section. That Star Fury's star, like the graphic, is reworked a little bit or something. The Blade of Grass got a rework, so another boring melee weapon that turns into the Edge of Night got a rework that will make it more interesting. It fires an upward spiraling razor leaf from the sword with every swing. This projectile has a short to medium range. This projectile does low damage, but ignores a substantial amount of defense, ensuring that it inflicts damage reliably. Damage reduced from 28 to 18, and use time reduced from 30 to 20. Increase the knockback from 3 to 4.5. And the crafting recipe has been changed, or now requires 3 vines. I guess that is a change. And the jungle spore cost has been increased from 12 to 15. Note, the poison has been buffed in 1.4.4, and the Blade of Grass and its Razor Leaf both benefit from this buff. I guess that'll be later in the balance changes section. The poison being buffed. Poison chance increased from 20% to 50%. I didn't even read the item. It's the Thorn Chakram, and poison being better will make the Thorn Chakram better. So I used to love the Thorn Chakram, man. I used to love it. I don't know why, but I used to love the Thorn Chakram, which is just the jungle like boomerang that you make with the jungle items. It was on mobile. When I used to play on mobile, which is where I started, it just like the Thorn Chakram used to be like, I used to really like it. So cool that it's being buffed. Beekeeper does more damage. It got resprited and the size was increased, so it's just better as a sword now. So that's cool. Lucy got a buff. The damage was increased a little bit. Use time was reduced. Lucy no longer uses use turn. This means that if you are currently swinging, changing your walking direction will not change the direction you are swinging her. The idle chatter messages are now less frequent, so that's cool. Lucy, while endearing, does kind of get annoying after a while. Muramasa got reworked. Finally, Muramasa got a change. Like, thank you. Even if it doesn't make it amazing, like, God, Muramasa is like one of the most memed on items. Especially because of the video that, who's the one guy who was doing a lot of Terraria stuff, a lot of Calamity stuff and 1.4 stuff, like all the tier lists. I forgot the guy's name. It's the one YouTuber that did it. It made the meme video of Muramasa that kind of blew up a little bit because Muramasa is terrible, or it was terrible. Upon striking an enemy, Muramasa will generate an additional slashing cut over the affected target, dealing half the base damage of Muramasa. So the damage was reduced a little bit, but it basically deals 1.5 times the damage, and I guess will hit twice, which if that extra hit does knockback in any way will also be useful. So that doesn't seem particularly great, but it's much better than what Muramasa was before. So I'm happy. I'm happy for the melee weapons. Valor, the damage was increased from 22 to 28. Valor is the yo-yo that you get from the dungeon. We're going through dungeon items, I assume, right now, like Muramasa and then Valor, so that kind of makes sense. The Flamerang got a buff. The damage was increased from 32 to 49, and on fire chance was increased from 20% to 50%, and the use time was increased from 15 to 20. So, large damage buff, and which kind of makes sense because the Flamerang is like, I've never even used the Flamerang, like it's just that bad. Now we've got another rework here, the Fiery Greatsword dash greater than Volcano. What Fiery Greatsword is evolving? Fiery Greatsword has evolved into Volcano. So yeah, that's what its new name is. Volcano learned Eruption. Upon striking an enemy, Volcano will generate a fire, or okay, that is supposed to be A, right?
will generate a fiery explosive area of effect, dealing additional damage to the original target and nearby enemies. Use time reduced from 30 to 40. So, or wait, yeah, reduced, so it swings slower. So this thing is probably going to do a lot more damage. I can't wait to actually test all these out. It's probably going to be a while because, like usual, like I've said, I'm goddamn busy. I'm busy, but I will get around to looking at all of these, and I really want to, especially these now. Like, I'm getting more excited looking at these weapon buffs. Like, they're reworks too. Like, all these just slept on. They're not slept on. Were not slept on. They were just buns. These garbage weapons, like, are actually like getting new life breathed into them. Like, it's so cool. Knight's Edge now has an area of damaging energy around the blade, dealing damage in a larger, wider area of effect, including better coverage behind the player. Additionally, this swing radius will spin around a second time in the direction of the player's aim, increasing the range of the weapon's forward reach to short to medium range. What does that mean? The swing radius will spin around a second time in the direction of the player's aim. That just sounds cool. Knight's Edge got reworked, so Knight's Edge is better now, because obviously Knight's Edge sucks too. Dark Lance got a buff. The damage is now increased from 29 to 34. It inflicts Shadow Flame, and it generates a shockwave at the end of the spear, which has the same sort of benefit with attack speed like the Rotted Fork does. I do remember actually seeing something in a video about leaks about this, where I think they were changing the hard mode version of Knight's Edge, and that was something that looked really cool. And now that I'm looking at all these reworks, that's what I'm thinking of, and I'm like, oh, they're like that's where this is coming from. Like, I'm not all like super duper surprised by all this happening, because like I'd seen something about this before in some way, shape, or form, and it was that a melee weapon at least was getting changed. The Breaker Blade got buffed. Damage was increased from 43 to 70. The use time was increased from 29 to 35. The size scale was increased, so it's bigger. And the breaking effect damage multiplier increased from 100 to 150%. Deals more damage to unhurt enemies. I think that was something that got changed in 1.4, right? Because I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. Yeah, deals double damage to healthy enemies. So now it deals even more damage, and even more damage, because it does, like, the base damage is increased massively, so just the first hit on enemies is going to do a lot. Okay, that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool change to the Breaker Blade. I like that. It looks like we just have very similar standard broadsword changes. All of the hard mode or swords are getting damage, use time, size, and knockback changes. So that's cool, right? They're all pretty much the same, though, as the other ones. The Naginata Pike Halberd are the hard mode spears. They're all getting damage buffs. The Phase Sabers are all getting damage buffs. Their use times are getting reduced, and the Crystal Shard crafting cost is reduced, so they're cheaper to make. The Cutlass, damage buff, use time buff. The Frostbrand and Icicle are getting buffs. The Icicle is the scythe, like the budget shadow scythe, or whatever the hell it's called, the one that drops from the I'm thinking they're called Reapers. They're not called Reapers. I don't know what they're called. The fucking phantom shadowy enemies in the Eclipse. But Frostbrand, the projectile cooldown is reduced from 55 frames to 30 frames. No longer uses the chirp sound when the cooldown is ready, as it would be too often. That's a weird thing to mention, but okay. The projectile now inflicts frostbite. The pierce count is increased from 2 to 3. The projectile now inflicts static immunity, meaning it will no longer interfere with other sources of piercing damage. Okay, so it pierces more enemies now. I don't know what the projectile cooldown reduction means. I guess I'm assuming that means that the projectile has never, like, as fast as it fires, has never actually been linked to how fast the sword swings, which is just something that I think of when I think of swords that have projectiles. I'm like, when it swings, it shoots a projectile, which that doesn't always make the most sense, and that's what I'm assuming this is changing. The sickle increase of damage. The range of the sickle projectiles got increased by 50%. The damage reduced Projectile damage reduced from 100% of base damage to 50% of base damage. The projectile is changed to use static frames and reduced the immune time between hits, so it deals damage more often. And the projectile pierce count is reduced from 5 to 3. So what I'm assuming is that it should be doing more damage overall because the base damage is increased, the range is increased, and the immune time got reduced, so it'll be hitting more often, and then the static frames thing will be better as well, to better stack with other weapons, right? Blade Tongue got a nerf. The Iker Shot pierce count reduced from unlimited to 5 hits. The projectile now inflicts static immunity, meaning it will no longer interfere with other sources of piercing damage. That's kind of a weird nerf. Was there a strange use case for Blade Tongue, or did it get buffed in 1.4 and became really strong and I didn't realize? Let's see, did Blade Tongue get changed? It did not. Blade Tongue is kind of bad, isn't it? Like, it's kind of iffy. Maybe there was just like a weird use case, like against the Destroyer or something, where it was too strong, and so they just decided to change it. I don't know why they nerfed Blade Tongue. I could be wrong that it's bad and it's just slept on, but I feel like it's just not good. But that's what it is. The Slap Hand got a buff. The damage was increased by a lot, and the use time was reduced. It's probably still not going to be very applicable since the Slap Hand is just a meme item that has, massive knockback. So that's what it is, but I mean, maybe a little more useful now since it has a lot more damage. Hellfire inflicts Hellfire instead of On Fire. I don't actually know the difference between the debuffs, but presumably Hellfire is better. It sounds like it should be doing more damage or doing more something than On Fire, right? That's cool. It also makes more sense that that's what a weapon called Hellfire inflicts and not the On Fire debuff. So, good change. Amarok inflicts Frostbite instead of Frostburn, and I'm assuming Frostbite is just a buffed version of Frostburn, how I'm assuming Hellfire is a buffed version of On Fire. The Chain Guillotine got a buff. The chains move faster and fly further. I don't know how good that's going to be since I think the Chain Guillotine is also kind of low damage. So, we'll see what happens with that, but I don't think it's ever really been that good of a weapon. It might end up just having more damage because the chains move faster, though, and then they go further, so it has more reach. I'll have to check that out at some point, and I don't even know how to get the Chain Guillotine, so, we'll see. At some point, maybe we'll see if that change actually has an effect. The Bananarang got a buff. It was mentioned earlier in the clown section. It's now a single item, not a 10 stacked item. As a result, it can now have prefixes. The damage is reduced from 55 to 45. The sell price of a single Bananarang is increased accordingly, and it now has a 10% chance to drop from clowns. Is this a nerf? How's it a buff though? It's way easier to use because you don't stack 10 of them. Can more of them be thrown at a time now because they're not limited to 10? How did the 10 stack even work? I forget that items like this even exist because I never use them because they suck. But light discs were like that too, right? Light discs. I wonder if those got changed, but they reduce the damage by 10, but it can have prefixes. So do the prefixes actually make up for a 10% reduced damage, or is it being a single item in itself a actual buff to the item's effectiveness and not only its practical uses, because you have to have 10 of them to actually use the item normally? I'm just wondering, is it just a practicality buff mostly, or is it actually an effectiveness buff? But being changed into a single item is a very interesting change, and I would like to check that out at some point. The knockback was increased from 0 to 2 on the Sergeant United Shield, and it allows it access to better reforge modifiers. So it'll actually hit enemies back now, and it has better modifiers, which is interesting. What was the best one that it could have before, though? Oh, Demonic. So Demonic is pretty bad. As it does not have knockback and thus cannot get modifiers that affect it. So that's why it can't have anything better than Demonic, because it didn't have knockback. So because it has knockback now, it's going to be you can get godlike on this, right? That's not what it's called. Godly, that's what it's called. So yeah, now that it has knockback, it can get the 15% knockback boost, when also godly is just better than demonic overall. Sergeant United Shield was a fun weapon. I remember using that and making a video about it. But you know, it didn't seem super applicable. I don't know if it really will at this point, but it is a buff regardless. The beam sword got a buff. The projectile cooldown reduced from 60 frames to 35 frames, so I assume you can use it more often. That's what I would assume the buff for this item is, because the projectile is slow as all hell and terrible to use. It no longer uses the mana chirp system to indicate the projectile is ready to fire, much like I think it was the Frost brand. It's now auto swing. I forgot that this wasn't auto swing. Jesus Christ, the beam sword sucked. It no longer uses use turn, which means that if you're currently swinging, changing your walking direction will not change the direction you're swinging it. Yeah, that's dumb too. Kind of like that's what they changed with Lucy. It no longer forces you to turn to face the direction the projectile is being fired in while swinging. So it's just made like infinitely less clunky by these changes. And it should be just easier to use. I mean, less clunky, right? Auto swing is less clunky. It's just easier to use. And then it should have less damage, or more damage, right? Because the projectile cooldown is reduced. I don't know if this will actually be a good weapon at all, but it sure as hell is not going to be as atrocious to use as it was before. Excalibur got a buff. It now has an area of damaging energy around the blade, dealing damage on a larger, wider area of effect, including better coverage behind the player, and the damage was increased. So that's basically the same change as Knight's Edge had, except Knight's Edge also had a secondary effect, and this one does not. So I guess that they're happy with just this for Excalibur. Gungnir, damage increase, and then it has the spear shockwave effect. So that's gonna be pretty cool. I want to see what this spear shockwave is going to do for the Rotted Fork, the Shadow Lance, and Gungnir. It's gonna be cool to check out. That's really dope. Yeah, so here's what I expected as well with the light disc. It's now a single item, not a 5 stacked item. As a result, you can now have prefixes on it. The recipe cost has been multiplied by 5 since you now only need to make 1. It now sells for 5 times as much, obviously, for obvious reasons. The damage was increased, the use time was reduced, and it can now shoot up to 6 discs at once instead of 5, and the projectile speed / distance increased from 13 to 16. So, unlike with the banana ring, which I'm still not sure about, this one is clearly a buff. The damage is increased, you use it faster, it shoots more discs, it does more damage, you can now get prefixes on it. This might actually be a decent item now. That's going to be cool to check out and actually see what it does. And then also the projectiles move faster and go further, right? That's what that means. The speed / distance increase. So that's a good change too. True Knight's Edge, here is the rework that I have been spoiled about somewhat, as in like I saw a leak in a video about leaks about 1.4.4. The True Knight's Edge has an area of damaging energy around the blade, dealing damage in a larger, wider area of effect, including better coverage behind the player. Instead of a sword projectile, it now fires a large spinning disc of energy, which travels a medium-long distance, striking multiple times. The use time is reduced from 105 to 70, the damage was reduced from 105 to 70, and the use time was increased from 26 to 32. Swings slower, deals less damage, base damage, but it'll be way more effective over a large area, and it has a multi-hit projectile, which should, end up dealing way more damage, you would assume. So that's a cool rework. It should make it less clunky, I would hope, to use, since that's kind of been one of the True Knight's Edge issues, as well as True Excalibur, although True Excalibur I think has always been a little bit better, in my opinion, because the projectile is easier to use. True Excalibur has the same area of effect, or damaging area around the blade effect that the other swords have gotten like it. It no longer fires a projectile sword beam. The damage was increased from 70 to 72, and the use time was increased from 16 to 18. That's a weird rework. So this one just doesn't have a projectile now. Like, is True Excalibur gonna be useful even if it doesn't have a projectile at all? Like, I can see True Knight's Edge being useful because it has a decent projectile, but what about True Excalibur? I had the same thought with like normal Excalibur. Like they didn't change much about it. They just gave it obviously the new damaging area effect, which will probably make the item better in certain ways, but not having the projectile will make it worse in other ways. So I don't know. That one's kind of weird, although I really do like the True Knight's Edge and the Knight's Edge reworks. Brand of the Inferno got a buff, resprited, increase in size. It inflicts Hellfire instead of On Fire. Brand of the Inferno is the item you get that from the Old One's army, right? That you can parry damage. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And then the Chlorophyte Saber, the projectile cooldown is reduced, so it should shoot faster if that's what that means, which I'm still not sure if it does. No longer uses the mana chirp system. Projectile damage is reduced from 100% to 70%. The projectiles linger for longer, and the projectiles now use static immunity frames, which I'm pretty sure static was as opposed to global, I would think. So yeah, this is the one that doesn't like it doesn't affect stacking damage types. Hope there's a lot of like single small changes here. The Chlorophyte Claymore / Partisan, the projectiles now use static immunity frames, so for the same reasons that I just mentioned. The Ghastly Glaive reduced the immunity frames applied by the spear itself, allowing it to hit a single target more often when swung. And I'm pretty sure the Ghastly Glaive is like the spear weapon that you get from the Ogre from the Old One's army. I'm pretty sure that one's also an Old One's army drop. Death Sigil, the knockback was decreased to prevent enemies from being knocked out of the spinning blades, so you should just get more damage out of this. The Butcher's Chainsaw. So both the chainsaw and its sparks now use static immunity frames. As a direct consequence of this, the sparks are now able to hit the same target that they are being spawned off of when hitting with a chainsaw. This results in a notable increase in single target damage when hitting an enemy with a chainsaw. And sparks also inflict Hellfire instead of On Fire. Pretty sure the Butcher's Chainsaw is still going to be basically useless since you just don't want to be that close to enemies, but that is a cool change to just deal a lot more damage and give it a better debuff. So cool stuff. The Terra Blade got a rework. So we have a damage reduction, a use time increase, so shoots slower and does less damage. It now has an area of damaging energy around the blade. Yeah, the same effect. And instead of a projectile sword beam fired on a cooldown, it now fires a medium to long range, rapidly moving slash of green energy with every swing. It sounds like it's kind of just the Knight's Edge stuff, the true Knight's Edge stuff. It's gonna be that's gonna be a weird one. I would assume it's meant to do similar damage or slightly higher damage, since the Terra Blade has kind of always just been a very strong, solid weapon, right? I don't think it's ever, maybe like when it first came out, it was like super powerful, but like, as the time's gone on, it's just, I don't know, it's not gotten power crept or anything, but it's just a good item. So I don't think that they would try to nerf it or buff it significantly. So I would think that it's it's supposed to be similar damaging, but they did change it, how it works. That's going to be interesting to check out. Scourge of the Corruptor got a buff. Mini Eaters move and track enemies faster, and the average number of Mini Eaters has been increased from 2.67 to 3, and the number is a much simpler 2 to 4 range. So small buff. I'm pretty sure Scourge of the Corruptor got a small buff, like a similar buff in 1.4 as well. So it's just another small buff. Maybe it'll get some more use, right? I love the Scourge of the Corruptor, honestly. I think I remember I haven't used it that much over the years, but it is a favorite item of mine. Paladin's Hammer is now auto swing. So obviously that's good, because having to click every time to shoot out the Paladin's Hammer is terrible. Makes it terrible in itself. I don't think it's that strong anyways, though, even with auto swing, but it's certainly a buff. Keybrand got a 20 damage increase. The bonus critical strike chance is increased from 14 to 17%, and reduced the maximum power of the scaling damage effect. This is canceled out by the damage buff, so that low health damage is the same as it was before. At higher health, enemies will take more damage than before. I did not know that Keybrand had whatever effect this is referencing. I don't know if that was a change that was made to 1.4, or if it's just something I've never noticed, but it has that. So it's just meant to be more damage overall, though. So that's cool for Keybrand. The Horseman's Blade got a buff. It now has an area of damaging energy. Okay, that changed. The damage is increased. It got doubled, 75 to 150. What? The pumpkins now deal 100% of the base damage of the sword instead of 150%, so it's more than they did before, and they will no longer be generated from statue-spawned enemies. So, you can't just summon pumpkins infinitely to like attack enemies or like one-shot the dungeon guardian, which is a thing that I'm pretty sure that was used for. They doubled the damage. Like, even if the projectiles themselves, which is the main use of the item, do less, I mean, like, that's still nuts, bro. Very cool buff to the Horseman's Blade. I love the Horseman's Blade as a concept, so I'm excited to use that. Very cool. The North Pole got a rework. The use time was increased, so it swings faster, or slower, I mean. Now spawns half as many projectiles, but the damage of the spear projectile now deals base damage, and the flakes deal 70% base compared to the previous 80 and 63. Removed the impact of wind on flakes. That was a thing. The spawning position is now semi-randomized so that they don't all fall in the exact location. Spear projectiles and the flakes now have a much shorter projectile lifetime. So that's probably meant to just be, like, it's supposed to be smoother to use, easier to use, not a specific buff or nerf. Probably a buff, honestly. Definitely not a nerf. I mean, no, it's a buff. I mean, the projectiles do more damage. Definitely a buff. And then I guess it's just supposed to be like, not, you know, because it was consistent with like the projectiles, with like the flakes and stuff, but it was consistently kind of ass if I'm being real. So I don't know what the spawning position being semi-randomized is gonna do to the item, but I can't imagine that it'll make it worse. Buff to the Christmas tree sword. The projectile was increased from 75% of the base damage to 100%. The flare-on got a buff. The bubbles now last longer before popping. The range at which the bubbles will lock on and chase the target has been increased, so the bubbles hit more consistently with the flare-on. Starlight. Range now increases the Titan Glove and prefix size modifiers. What? What is Starlight? Well, what is that? Hold on. Oh, it's the Empress of Light. It's the Empress of Light sword. Okay, I just don't know that much about the Empress of Light except for like the main summoning weapon that was like all the craze when the item first came out. But that's Starlight right there. If you didn't know either, like me, like dummy me. The range increases with the Titan Glove and prefix size modifiers. So basically this beam of light is the range. This will go further. So that does sound like a potentially significant buff. I do like that. I think that's cool. Small, but cool. The Influx Waver, which I think is like kind of just the slightly better Terra Blade that you can get from the Martian invasion. The damage is reduced. It's supposed to be buffed though. Reduced from 110 to 100. There's a secondary projectile spawned after a successfully landed projectile hit will now move with the target, significantly reducing the chance of missing. So I think that's good. Probably reduces the damage on some targets that are just like really slow, but like bosses will get hit more consistently with the Influx Waver, which is significant, right? Because those are the most dangerous enemies. Like something like Duke Fishron, that's one boss that you would like fight right after getting the Influx Waver. And something that's moving that fast, because, you know, Duke Fishron moves really fucking fast. You know, a lot of the projectiles could end up just missing. So it is cool that they've addressed that a little bit. The Flying Dragon got a buff. The use time is reduced from 25 to 20 and no longer has a damage penalty when it has no line of sight with targets. I don't know what the Flying Dragon is, and I'm not interested enough to look it up. The Star Wrath got a buff. The damage was increased from 110 to 170. That's a lot of damage increase. Projectile damage is reduced from 2 times the base damage to 1 times the base damage. Falling stars now use local immunity, so each star will be able to hit a target for damage. Does that mean that if you hit an enemy with 1 star from the Star Wrath, then another star couldn't hit, like, on its own? So you'd have to wait until, like, the immunity cooldown or whatever to be off, so, like, some stars would miss, and then the next one would hit, and that would sort of continue, right? That's what this is implying, I think, when I'm thinking about, like, what the immunity frame stuff meant. So it should just end up doing a lot more damage overall to at least single targets. Meow got a buff. The use time was reduced from 16 to 14. Projectiles deal 1.25% or 2. That would be percent. No, that would not be. That's incorrect. 1.25 times the base damage, and they use local immunity. So each bouncing cat has its own damage timers, so they never conflict with each other. So, every cat will hit the target. The Terrarian got a buff. Both the yo-yo and the orbs now use static immunity because the yo-yo and the orbs now each do damage without being blocked by the other. This results in a substantial increase to the Terrarian's potential damage. That is very cool. I would like to use the Terrarian and see how much better it is now. The Jousting Lance got a damage increase. All of the Jousting Lances... What did I just say? All of the Jousting Lances got a damage increase, which probably means they're still bad because I think I remember grabbing a Jousting Lance, one of the Jousting Lances, and looking at it and being like, this is useless. And a damage increase is not going to change that. So that is what it is. That was just melee weapons. Can you believe that? I assume the changelog for melee weapons is going to be a little bigger than the other ones because melee weapons are definitely the weapon type that needed the most work. That was like 50 minutes burned on melee weapons, though. Holy moly, dude. The flintlock pistol got a buff. More damage. Knockback increased from 0 to 1, allowing access to better modifiers, so you can get godlike on it. The musket got nerfed. It's no longer autofire. Why would you make the musket? Oh, why would you take autofire off of any weapon? No real logic. That's bad. The use time being reduced is like, that's fine. So that means that it shoots faster, but you can't auto-fire it now. Like, why? I don't get that change to the musket at all. I know it's a strong weapon, but like, why would you take off auto-fire? You should still be able to shoot like faster than auto-fire, but it's just more annoying to do because it's not auto-fire. I don't know. This seems kind of silly. The Undertaker, which is the Crimson Pistol, damage increase, use time reduction, so it shoots faster, and the knockback was increased, so it should be more in line with the musket, you would hope. That's kind of what they're trying to do, since the musket has always kind of been better than the Undertaker. That's just what it is. The Blood Rain Bow, projectiles generate a little bit of light and can be seen better at night. I guess that's just better for aiming, right? Because I think it's what you do is that you shoot and the projectiles come down from the sky, kind of like a budget Daedalus Stormbow with the Blood Rain Bow, so you can just see the projectiles better at night and aim better. The Harpoon now uses local immunity. In practice, this means that no longer how close or rapidly you fire at the target, you will never miss due to immune frames from the previous shot. I think the Harpoon's still going to be buns, but that will be an interesting buff, since I think that does come into play sometimes, and you do just end up just missing shots for no reason because of that. So, cool. Spiky Balls, damage increased from 15 to 16, pierce count increased from 6 to 7. So, interesting change for Spiky Balls. They're just Spiky Balls, dude. The Star Cannon got a buff. The knockback is increased, so you can get godlike on the Star Cannon now instead of just... What could you get on it? Because that's definitely affected by attack speed, right? What can you get on the Star Cannon? You can't just get demonic. That's weird. So because you don't have knockback, because you have knockback now, you should be able to get the Unreal on it now, right? You should be able to get an Unreal Star Cannon, because now that you can get knockback, that means you can get Unreal, which increases knockback, since it's basically just the legendary of guns. So that's cool. You get Unreal on the Star Cannon now. I would assume you can get Godlike on it now too, right? So cool buff. It's not super impactful, but it is small and significant, and it doesn't really make sense why you wouldn't be able to have an Unreal Star Cannon. So, cool buff to have. The Bee's Knees, to correct a code inconsistency issue, effective use time is reduced from 24 to 23. That is very vague, but you could shoot it a tiny bit faster now. I don't know what else that changes about it. The quad-barreled shotgun got a buff, damage is reduced, but the pellet count is increased, and one pellet is now always aimed towards the cursor accurately. So I don't know how much more effective that's going to make this, but it means that not all of your bullets are going to miss, which is a very annoying thing with the quad-barreled shotgun. That's exceedingly annoying. You should end up with more damage though, as long as your bullets are hitting because you have more of them. The handgun got a rework apparently. The damage was increased and the use time was increased. Why exactly is that a rework for the handgun? It's just a buff, isn't it? That doesn't make sense to me. The Phoenix Blaster got a rework. The damage was increased from 24 to 33, and the use time was increased from 11 to 17. Why are those considered reworks? I'm not positive. Is there something else that I'm missing that is changed? These got reworked, I guess. The handgun is still probably going to be crap, but we'll see. The Cobalt Repeater, all the repeaters got slight buffs to damage and use time. So that is what it is. The Marrow damage from 50-53 and is now auto fire. That not being auto fire is so dumb. Like, why would that have ever been how it was? But now it is, so it's better. Probably not that good, but Marrow is going to be a better weapon. The Ice Bow got a use time reduction, so that's nice. The Hallowed Repeater got a nerf, which is kind of weird. I feel like the Hallowed Repeater was never fantastic. Like, it wasn't bad, but not that good. But slight nerf, I guess. Less damage and shoots a little slower. It's not like that significant though. So like whatever you used the Hallowed Repeater for before, you're still gonna be able to use it for fine. The Flamethrower got a rework. It now uses local immunity frames on its projectiles, so that should mean that like everything hits, right? You're not gonna miss a single target with the Flamethrower at all. Now ignores up to 15 points of enemy defense before losing damage. What does that mean, losing damage? Pierce count increased from 3 to 4, so it shoots through more enemies. Reworked the visuals and the hitbox size, and now inflicts Hellfire instead of on fire. So better debuff. Pierces more. I don't know exactly what that defense and then losing damage term means. I don't know. So that kind of indicates that it should be more bursty, have more burst damage. And then local immunity frames just mean that it does more damage because its projectiles, like all of its projectiles, are hitting more consistently, right? Flamethrower might be fun to use. I would like to try that out since it's kind of just been garbage for forever. The Superstar, what the hell is my mouth doing? The Superstar Shooter got a buff. The Star Slash now uses static immunity, so its immune frames will no longer block subsequent star shots from hitting. The Star Slash now inflicts 75% of base damage instead of 50%. What's the Superstar Shooter? I don't know what this item is. It's a hard mode range weapon that uses Fallen Star. I did not know the Star Cannon had a fucking upgrade. What? It's a direct upgrade of the Star Cannon. Okay, wow. This is one of the weapons I missed from 1.4 since I wasn't super in depth with everything in that and I did not play it for that long. That's very cool though. I'm gonna have to try this. I never knew it was a thing, man. Okay, well now shots will not get blocked and it inflicts more base damage, so way more damage. That's gonna be cool. The Pulse Bow got a tier change. Oh, okay. So the damage got reduced slightly, but it's now sold after defeating all 3 mechs instead of after Plantera. So a little bit of a nerf, but you can get it earlier. I don't see the point in this change. I really don't see the point in that change, honestly. Like, it just seems like you nerfed the weapon. It's still going to be a pain to get, though, right? Because you still have to rely on the traveling merchant to get it. That's very bizarre. Okay. Maybe there's something else going on with that I'm not privy to, but that's what it is, I guess. The Phantom Phoenix got a buff. The Phoenix projectile now inflicts Hellfire instead of on fire. The converted fire arrows still inflict on fire as they are just normal fire arrows. The Phantom Phoenix, I think, is the weapon that Betsy drops, right? Venus Magnum, the use time was increased and is now auto fire. So shoots slightly slower for some reason and auto fires now. So it'll be less clunky to use. I don't know if that'll make it that much better because I don't think it's that great regardless, even if it is auto fire. We'll have to see about that though. The rocket launcher got a buff. The damage was increased from 45 to 55. So, I mean, I don't think the damage is the rocket launcher's issue. I could be wrong though, but a buff is a buff, right? The elf melter got a rework, like the flamethrower, I would assume. Damage reduced a little bit. The bursts of flame per shot reduced from 6 to 5. Uses local immunity like the flamethrower. It does the same ignore defense thing. The pierce count was increased, so it pierces more enemies. It now inflicts frostbite instead of on fire, so it has a better debuff. And they reworked the visuals and the hitbox size. So, like the flamethrower, that's going to be interesting to look at. The Electrosphere launcher got a nerf. The missiles no longer deal direct damage, but still impact and turn into Electrospheres, which will then hurt the target normally. I don't know why that was a necessary nerf, but that's what we got. That's an interesting one, though. The Aerial Bane. No actual change has been made to its functionality, only the way its damage is displayed on the tooltip. The tooltip base damage now shows ground damage done, not the air damage done, to more accurately match the tooltip. Okay, the Aerial Bane is the weapon that Betsy drops. What is the other weapon that I didn't know what it was then? No, not that far back. What the hell? It's like right up there. Phantom Phoenix. What the hell is the Phantom Phoenix then? I don't know what these weapons are. Sorry, I know this is super unprofessional, but I'm just a friggin' noob. Phantom Phoenix. It's still from the old one's army. It's dropped by the ogre, and then the other one is dropped by Betsy. So that's just very weird. I forgot that this was a thing, I guess. So that's what that is. Celebration MK2, damage increased from 40 to 50, fixed a bug that caused red missiles to rapidly hit every frame, doing more damage than expected. So, this was I don't know if it was buffed or if it was or I don't know if this was a different weapon entirely or if it was you could craft the celebration into this, but basically it was just meant to be a better celebration, right? Which is the thing made by the Moonlord or dropped by the Moonlord that was always ass, so they made a new version of it in 1.4. And now it looks like we're onto ranged. Yeah, we're onto some different range stuff, not the actual weapons. The archery potion got a nerf. That's kind of weird. Bow damage reduction, or bow damage bonus reduced from 1.2 to 1.1x. The Iker and Cursed Darts got a nerf, which reverted the 1.4 buff. The Iker Dart damage reduced from 12 to 10, and the Cursed Dart damage reduced from 10 to 9. And they fixed a bug that allowed the Iker Dart to rapidly hit every frame when used at very close range, dealing much more damage than expected. Were these really good? Cursed and Iker darts? What does it mean by reverting the 1.4 buff? Were these darts changed? Or are I assume, right? So did the darts get buffed, but the buffs weren't needed because Iker is just good anyways, and Cursed got buffed, so the Cursed dart was good enough with just the buff to the debuff? I guess we're gonna have to take a look at that when we get there. Exploding bullets don't deal self damage anymore, which is good because that sucks. Frostburn arrows got a nerf. The ammo damage is reduced from 9 to 7, so I guess Frostburn arrows are too strong for how easy they are to get, I would assume. Holy arrows got a nerf. Star damage reduced from 50% to 33%, so again, like hitting Daedalus Stormbow, I guess that's kind of the main use of holy arrows, just using Daedalus Stormbow. And then cluster rockets, all variants got a buff. Fragment damage increased from 33% to 50%. I don't even know what cluster rockets are, gonna be real with you, but that's the buff that they got. Magic weapons, that took a while too, bro. Holy shit. It took a lot less time than the melee weapons though, since they're, I thought, not gonna be as many changes. Base mana regeneration got a buff. The base mana regen rate has been more than doubled for when you're not moving and not using mana regen potions. The mana regen bonus when stationary has been cut by a third. This reduction is the exact size of the amount added to the base regen rate, so there is no net gain in the total amount of regen possible. A player using mana regen potions / stationary should have the same mana regen and speed as before, but the minimum mana regen rate has been increased substantially, making mana regen potions and being stationary less mandatory for playability. So that kind of is trying to make mana less clunky to use in the early game, so you don't have to sit still or use potions as much, and it makes the mana flower a little less necessary, right? The average duration of on fire buff was slightly increased. I don't know if this is a global buff or if it's just for Wand of Sparking, but the on fire lasts longer. It's probably not going to make Wand of Sparking very good, but is what it is. Three of the staffs got buffs. Mana cost was increased. So this one didn't get this because it already had more than 5. If you have more than 5 mana, you can get better prefixes. What the? What prefix does that help you get? I assume just one of the like higher tier ones, but you can get a better prefix, I guess. They also increase the damage of all of them. The Sapphire Staff is now auto fire. I don't know if these ones aren't, or if they already are and this one wasn't, or something. I think these ones aren't, right? Amethyst and Topaz, but they're making the Sapphire one better since it's like a higher tier gem. The use time was reduced for these ones as well. So interesting changes to the staffs, but they got buffed, all of them. The Thunder Zapper, damage increased from 12 to 20, mana cost increased from 5 to 7, knockback increased from 2 to 3. So buff for the Thunder Zapper, which is, I think, the magic weapon that you could find in the underground desert. Don't know how much better it's going to be, but small buffs, right? They buffed the Crimson Rod, which is cool. The duration of the clouds is increased to 5 minutes. How long was it before, I wonder? I don't actually know. It now uses static frames, so immune frames will no longer interfere with non-Crimson Rod sources of damage. That's very useful so that you can make sure all your damage from all of your sources are hitting, and this isn't getting in the way, which is something I'm pretty sure I have noticed before. The mana cost has increased a lot, which shouldn't affect that much. Why am I getting fucking emails? Can you stop, please? Go away. The Weather Pane got a rework. I guess the Pierce count went from 12 to 15. The time between hits increased from 20 frames to 25 frames, and the duration of the projectile has increased by 2 seconds. And the Weather Pane is the weapon that drops from the Deer Clops that shoots out a tornado, I think. I don't exactly remember how the tornado worked, but this should, I think, do overall more damage since each projectile will last longer, and then it'll be better for dealing with multi-segmented enemies or more enemies total. So that's interesting. I don't really know whether that's labeled as a rework again, kind of like a lot of or multiple of the weapons that I've seen. This just seems like a buff, but I don't know. The B gun got a buff. That was a token knockback value, allowing access to better modifiers. So whatever the modifier is that you need knockback for to get for magic weapons, I don't know what it is since I don't know the magic weapons as well as the other types of weapons. Magic Missile, the damage was increased, which is just a straight buff, and I know that it got a lot better. I forget exactly how it got changed, but it got way better in 1.4 than in the previous iterations. So that's a significant buff. I mean, like 7 damage for a like mid pre-hard mode item is pretty big. Or that's 8 damage, and it was a weapon I remember using and really enjoying using after those changes that it had. So that's gonna be cool to use. The Aqua Scepter got a buff, which, you know, I mean, the item is so bad, so good. The damage was increased by 11, knockback increased, mana cost increased a little bit, the range increased substantially, and the angle of descent is more gradual. So it does way more damage, it does more knockback, and the range is longer. So that might actually have some practical uses now. The Flower of Fire, the projectile is faster, goes further, and then it now bounces in additional time. So I don't think that'll be that much more useful, since I think the problem with the Flower of Fire is that it doesn't do enough damage anyways. So again, though, a buff is a buff. The Sapinators, gray and orange buff, question mark. The use time was reduced by 1. What kind of a meme change is that, bro? What in the world? Well, that's funny. Now onto the magic dagger, though, which is a straight buff. The damage was reduced. It's now auto fire, which is nice. Having that not auto fire was annoying. It now uses local immunity frames, as the fire rate was so fast that they conflicted with themselves. The daggers, that is cool. The distance before daggers begin to fall has been increased by 50%, so you can throw them further. You won't miss daggers because of the immunity frame stuff. So should just be an overall net increase in effectiveness. Cursed Flames, more damage. The weapon's probably still not going to be that good since the Cursed Flames, you know, it's just a book that shoots a ball of Cursed Flames. Well, actually, no, because the Cursed Flames debuff did get buffed, right? Unless they like reverted that change. Yeah, I mean, Cursed Flames probably, I mean, it still wasn't that good even with the debuff change, right? Because the item itself is just kind of bad, I would imagine, is what happened. So they're buffing it again. The Flower Frost got a buff. The projectile speed is faster, inflicts frostbite instead of frostburn. The Golden Shower does more damage, which is surprising. Did they nerf it in 1.4? Because the Golden Shower has always been a very good weapon. The damage itself has always been decent, and obviously it's always been very good because of the Iker debuff. I don't think they did anything to Iker in 1.4 either. Significant buff to the Golden Shower though. That's like almost a like third. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Like a 33% damage buff. It's off by 1 because it already had 21. The Bloodthorn got a buff and slightly increases the size of the thorns. Thorns now last longer. Thorns can now sprout from platforms if they are in range. Increases the pierce count per thorn from 3 to 4, and removed a system accidentally left on the Bloodthorn since 1.4 that caused it to have unintended damage loss every time a thorn hit a target. Should immediately result in much higher damage when a target being hit repeatedly by the same cast. There's a lot of typos in this changelog, although there's a lot of text, so I guess that is, to be expected in some ways. The Meteor Staff got a damage or a mana reduction cost, so you can just spam it better, so that might be a decent buff for it. Frost Staff buff now inflicts Frostbite. The use time was reduced, so it shoots faster. It's probably just not going to be that good, since I don't think the damage is very good anyways. And I don't know if Frostbite's actually going to be that useful. The Shadow Flame Hextall got a buff. The damage was reduced from 40 to 32. Uses local immunity, so all of the tendrils hit on their own immunity timer. It always fires one tendril directly towards the cursor, though others will continue to vary wildly beyond cursed range. So that's nice. It has some degree of consistency with the shots, and then it should just be dealing more damage because all of the tendrils can hit. The Spirit Flame got a buff, double the size of its AoE damage. The AoE is so small before that it was nearly incapable of hitting multiple targets. This is still a very small AoE effect, but should now be able to hit 2 targets directly next to each other. The projectile duration is increased by 25%. Again, what is the Spirit Flame? What is this item? Never mind, I know what it is. As soon as I looked it up, I knew what it was. It's the Genie Lantern. So it just barely, didn't even really have an AoE. Now they made it actually have an AoE. And then the duration of the projectile is increased. So that's probably not a significant buff. Might be, though. I don't know. The Nimbus Cloud got a rework, I guess. The duration of the clouds was increased to 5 minutes. The damage was reduced from 36 to 30. It now uses static frames, so same thing with the Crimson Rod. Mana cost increased. Pierce count reduced from infinite to 5. It's kind of unfortunate. It's because the infinite pierce count on the Nimbus Rod was really useful for a lot of things like farms, but I don't know. I guess it is kind of unfair in a way as well. The Klinger Staff got a buff, duration increased to 5 minutes, and that uses static frames, so the immune frames will no longer interfere with non-Klinger Staff sources of damage. And the Klinger Staff is the one that shoots up a geyser of cursed flames, I'm pretty sure. So that one's gonna be weird because it's gonna change to sort of a passive area that you can just use it on, and then it'll just stay there. The effect will just stay there, and it'll do damage and inflict the Cursed Flames debuff, which I'm pretty sure it does do. It's Klinger Staff, and I know that the effect and the attack is Cursed Flames. So yes, the static frame stuff and duration increased by a lot. So I mean, you should be able to use this for farming and stuff, I would imagine, kind of like the Nimbus Rod. The Magical Harp got a buff. The knockback was increased from 0.25 to 2. I don't know how impactful that is, but it's a buff. The Tome of Infinite Wisdom damage is increased from 32 to 36. The tornado damage is reduced from 2 times the base damage to 1.75 times the base damage. So that's an interesting buff. The Wasp Gun got a buff. The Wasps move faster. They inflict static immunity, meaning they don't interfere with other sources of piercing damage. And they now have a token knockback value, allowing access to better modifiers. So you can get whatever the modifier is, again, for magic weapons. That applies to. The Leaf Blower got a buff. Mana cost increased from 4 to 5, allowing better modifier access. The Inferno Fork got a buff. Damage increased to 70. The AoE damage does 75% of the base damage instead of 65. The blast effect lasts longer. Knockback reduced from 8 to 5 to limit how far enemies are knocked out of the blast radius. It inflicts Hellfire now instead of On Fire, so kind of makes sense with that debuff change. I don't know how good that'll make the Inferno Fork. It's still kind of just like clunky to use. I don't think that'll change that much, although I could be wrong. We'll have to see about that, when you actually test out the weapon. The Shadow Beam Staff, the damage got increased from 60 to 80. That's a big damage buff. I remember the Shadow Beam Staff used to be really good, like back in the day. That's a big buff. That's a big buff. 60 to 80 is a huge damage buff. Especially for something that can hit multiple times, like the Shadow Beam Staff when you use it right. The Spectre Staff now uses static immune frames, so its immune frames will no longer conflict with other attacks. I don't know how good that is. I never really used the Spectre Staff, but, if it was interfering with other attacks, then it will no longer do so. The Magnet Sphere got a buff. The duration increased, so it lasts longer, and it bounces off of walls instead of the sphere vanishing. So, that's way more effective in, tight spaces. And, will end up just doing more damage over time because it lasts longer. The Rainbow Gun duration is increased from 20 to 40 seconds, so that rainbow lasts forever. And now the static immunity frames, or it uses static immune frames, so they don't conflict with other attacks. So you can set up a rainbow, it'll last for way longer, and all of your other damage will go through when you use that, so that's cool. The Toxic Flask got a buff. Toxic Flask, throwable item that you get from Flyman. The damage is increased, use time is increased, so shoots slower, does more damage. The flask is faster, it goes for longer, or reaches further. I guess that's better. Received a visual overhaul to make the gas cloud more gassy. Okay. Projectiles linger substantially longer than before. They no longer penetrate walls, but will now spread out around a region, slightly pushing away from each other to fill a small area of space. This results in more concentrated area of gas clouds with less wasted to being stuck in walls or the floor. That should be way more effective for area denial, right? Way more effective for closed off areas where you're just trying to kill lots of enemies, I would imagine. So I'm gonna want to check that out. The Toxic Flask has never been that good, so it'd be interesting to see if these changes will make it good now. The Heat Ray got a straight damage increase from 80 to 90. It's still kind of basic. I don't think it's ever been that bad though, the Heat Ray, but it's just not good. 10 damage might make it decent. We'll have to see. Bat Scepter got a buff. They move faster when tracking a target. So I guess you should just be hitting your projectiles more consistently. The Stellar Tune got a buff, getting a knockback increase from 0 to 1.5, allowing access to better modifiers. I'm assuming that's another 1.4 item that I don't know what it is, because I have no idea what the Stellar Tune is. Night Glow got a buff. Projectiles that are not currently tracking a target linger roughly 50% longer before disappearing, and projectiles will have their duration reset to full upon beginning to track a target. I don't know what the Night Glow is either, but honestly, this is taking so much fucking longer than I thought it would, so I'm not gonna look it up. The Bubble Gun got a buff. Projectile speed and distance increased from 11 to 15. Bubbles now last twice as long before popping, meaning that more bubbles reach their full range and they linger longer before disappearing. Mana cost increased from 4 to 5, allowing access to better modifiers. So you get better modifiers for more damage. Bubbles go further and they move faster, and they last longer. So this will be better for area denial and stuff, and they just reach further, so more effective for everything, right? Razorblade Typhoon got a nerf. It's kind of sad. Razorblade Typhoon's awesome, but it is exceedingly strong and is useful all the way up until Moonlord, which a lot of the weapons that you get from Fishron and in that area kind of aren't. So I can understand it. Hopefully, it doesn't kill the item, but we'll have to see. The duration of the projectiles got reduced, damage reduced, mana cost increased, so it's nerfed in all those ways. So that does kind of suck. It's kind of always been one of my favorite items, the Razorblade Typhoon. I think it's a fan favorite item. People are going to be upset that got nerfed, but that is just what it is, man, and it's not unjustified. The item's always been extremely strong. Nebula Blaze got a buff. Lunar Flare got a buff. I'm pretty sure those are both the Nebula Pillar items. Lunar Flare, mana cost reduction. Nebula Blaze knockback increase from 0 to 3, so it gets a better modifier. I don't know why I read those out of order. I am reading a lot of stuff out of order now because I'm just like blindly reading them because I'm just gone. I've been doing this for like 3 hours, maybe like 2.5, and I took a break to go eat. And even longer if you count before I went to work when I recorded part of the last video. Jesus Christ, there's just so much to go through here. This is wild, and like there's still like 6 more tabs. I'm just hoping that like the other ones outside of the weapons and the bosses and enemies are not as big, because holy shit, there's so much stuff here, dude. I do just want to get all this into one video, condensed all into one, um, just so I can get all that information out to everybody who doesn't want to read every single thing themselves, right? Although I'm sure I'm not pretty to listen to since my throat's kind of sore and stuff now, but it is what it is. So we got summoning weapons. The leather whip got a buff, knockback increased. The purchase value was reduced from 15 gold to 10 gold. Snapthorn got nerfed, damage was increased. The knockback was increased. The jungle fury Snapthorn whip's speed buff has been reduced from 20% to 12%. Stinger's crafting cost increased from 12 to 15, and Jungle's for crafting cost increased from 30 to 12. So it was like dirt cheap to cost, and now it's actually like in line with the other jungle weapons. Swing slightly slower, but the knockback is better, and the damage is better. So not a huge nerf to the Snapthorn, but I guess that a lot of the whips were pretty strong since it gave summoners like an extra damage type, as well as just a lot of like extra little buffs for the summons and for themselves, just because of how the whips worked. So some of them getting nerfs kind of makes sense. The Spinal Tap got a nerf. The damage was reduced from 29 to 27. I'm pretty sure all of these are just whips. Everything on the screen right now are just whips. The Cool Whip got a buff. Damage was reduced from 50 to 45. It now inflicts 6 tag damage. I think tag damage is the damage that is dealt when your summons hit the target after you like mark them, right? I think that's what that is. I might be wrong. I haven't played around a ton with the summoner stuff in 1.4 because I wasn't doing that very much before I stopped playing. The Snowflake damage increased from 10 to 15 and now moves 50% faster, so I guess it shoots a snowflake or something. I don't know. I've never used this item. It now inflicts Frostbite instead of Frostburn, so better debuff as well. Durandal, the use time is reduced from 30 to 28, so it shoots faster or is used faster. Durandal's Blessing, the speed buff, has been reduced from 35% to 25%. So you use it slightly faster, but the speed buff that it gives you is significantly lowered, so it should just be overall slower to use. The Morning Star got a buff, use time reduced, so you use it faster. Tag damage increased from 5 to 8. The minion critical bonus increased from 5 to 12. The visual change, it has many more segments on the chain, which results in a more visible white-gray swing profile. This will increase its visibility somewhat when swung in dark and night environments. So better visibility, and all of its effects and some of its stats are just made better. The Dark Harvest got a rework. This is still all whips. Use time reduced from 30 to 27. Harvest time, the speed buff has been reduced from 50% to 35%. I guess the speed buffs have been a little over the top, is what I'm getting with a lot of these changes. Reaping, Dark Harvest's special tag debuff, will now proc damage on the affected target as well as nearby targets. This acts as an effective 10 tag damage, so it has somewhat of a AoE effect, is what I'm getting from that. Snapthorn, Durandal, and Dark Harvest fix an issue where whip speed buffs from whips would incorrectly apply the buff to melee weapons. Their tooltips have been updated to emphasize this fix. That's bizarre. I don't know who would be abusing that anyway. I guess if you're getting a 50% melee weapons speed buff and it lasts for any significant amount of time, I guess that is kind of abusable, so I don't know if that's just something that they noticed or that was brought to their attention and they're like, oh, we should fix that because that's unintentional, or if people were actually abusing it to, make things happen. But that change makes sense. The blade staff got nerfed. It now only gains 75% of the damage from whip tags due to its high high hit rate and armor piercing capabilities. What's the blade staff? It's the one that summons an enchanted dagger. So not swords. I guess it does, right? Yeah, no, okay. That summons swords. So that's what that does. The blade staff. That was a 1.4 weapon, I'm pretty sure. So that's why I didn't remember it. The Sanguine Staff got a nerf, knockback reduced from 8 to 3, fixed the bug where Sanguine Bats could hit a single target more than one time if the player was very close to the target. All minion staves. Minion summoning staves are now auto-fire, but minions which bypassed their attack cooldown immediately upon summoning no longer do so. Staves are just what you use to summon the minion, right? I didn't know that's what they were called, but you can auto-swing them, which before you couldn't do. You could only, like, if you held down the button on a minion summoner, it would just swing once and summon it, and now you can do it multiple times, which means you can summon multiple minions without having to click multiple times, is what I'm getting from that. You can resummon multiple of your minions more easily to different areas if that becomes an issue, but you can't use that. Like, you can't use summoning a minion to reset the attack cooldown, which I know that some of them did do. Like, I'm pretty sure imps did that, right? Like, if you just summoned an imp, it would just shoot immediately. So you can't do that because they would just be used extremely quickly, because all of them are auto fire now, and you could just, like, basically reset very slow attacking minions like imps by doing that, I would think. The optic staff got a rework. I didn't know they had different names. Retina Mini is what it's called. Spasmatism has the same name, but the smaller retinizer is called Retina Mini. Is that what it's actually called? I didn't know that. The lasers no longer pierce. As a result, they're no longer impacted by immunity frames. Retina Mini's damage is increased from 24 to 26. Spasmatism's damage is reduced from 30 to 21. Spasmatism has a more flexible charging range when pursuing targets, and twin minions now return to the player more quickly. So that kind of sounds like an overall nerf, if you're asking me. But they might be able to chase down enemies a little better. But overall, tiny nerf, I would assume, which is kind of sad. But the opposite staff has always been great, so why not? I guess, it's a little weaker, unless it isn't. And what the, like, tiny buff to Retina Mini and the more flexible charging range, whatever the hell that means, is, like, that much of a buff. Maybe it is a buff, I don't know. Deadly Sphere got a buff. Damage was reduced, uses local immunity frames, so at higher summon counts, the damage dealt by the Deadly Spheres should be significantly higher. The aggro range has been increased, so it will attempt to engage enemies from further distances. Additionally, it improved how its dash movement is able to engage enemies at a distance, fixed a bug that causes Deadly Spheres to spontaneously de-aggro from enemies in the middle of combat. That is a bug. That sounds very annoying. Sphere minions now return to the player more quickly. Pygmy Staff. Pygmy damage increased from 34 to 40. Pygmy Spheres are now Spears are now a little bit faster. Pygmies will now attempt to predictively aim at moving targets, though of course enemies can change course. Pygmy Spears now always inflict venom and no longer inflict poison. Pygmies now move faster when returning to the player, so they do more damage. The projectiles are quicker, so they hit better. They also predictively aim, so they hit better. And they inflict a better debuff. So Pygmy Staff should be significantly better, which is cool, because honestly, the Pygmies are not that good. I'm pretty sure the Pygmy Staff is what you get from Plantera, right? It's never been that great of a weapon. So it's cool that they're buffing it, since it might have some use now. Desert Tiger now runs 25% faster when chasing enemies on foot. That has to be the desert weapon they get from the desert chest in the dungeon, which I completely forgot about and never looked up or found anything about. So I still don't know what it does, so I'm not going to look that up, because I still don't want to spoil myself, since I kept myself spoiler free from the Desert Tiger this long anyways, so why not? The Raven Staff got a buff. Ravens will now attempt to return to the player faster depending on how fast the player is moving. I don't know what sort of practical use that change has and why that's a buff. I guess just they keep up with the player more, right? Is what I'm saying, is what I'm seeing. So they'll be able to defend you better, I would think. The Tempest Staff got a buff. I'm pretty sure that's the one that shoots the sharks you get from Fish Run. Tempest Staff tornadoes now continue to fire at enemies when returning to the player, so that's useful. Tempest Staff now returns to the player faster depending on how fast the player is moving, so a similar change as the Raven Staff. And the tornadoes have been changed from using a global immunity system with 20 frames of immunity time to using static immunity with only 10 frames. Okay, so a better kind of immunity that doesn't affect or impact your other damage types as much. And then that's weird though, that it's just the tornadoes and not the shark projectiles as it shows right here. So I don't know how much of an impact it's gonna have, but it certainly is a buff. Xeno Staff, fire rate is reduced. UFOs no longer need to fully return to the player before they can teleport and re-engage with a new enemy. UFOs will now attempt to return to the player faster depending on how fast the player is moving. So the return change and then a buff or a change that makes them less clunky, I guess, is the best way to say what that is, because they can just start attacking sooner instead of having to like move around and just not attack for longer. So that's the buff. All sentries got a buff. Whip tags and effects now apply to sentry damage the same way that they apply to minions, and the duration of all sentries has been increased from 2 to 10 minutes. I like these duration increases. They seem very just like useful. Like you don't have to think about like your Crimson Rod and your Nimbus Rod and your Sentry summons as much anymore, because they just stay around for way longer. That's cool. Houndius Shootius now has a short delay on firing after being summoned. That's a weird change. Houndius Shootius is the turret or sentry summon that you get from the Deerclops. So I guess you could kind of abuse resummoning it to get a lot of attacks, I would think. It's not really a nerf though. Although I guess that is a nerf, like by definition. It got changed to in a negative way. Although that that doesn't affect the effectiveness of like the long-term use of the item. It's just like if you're summoning it and like resummoning it, I would assume that like if you're doing something like that, if that's something you can do to kind of abuse the item to get more damage out of it, that's being changed, and that's just a straight nerf to it. Explosive traps, these were the old ones, armies, summons. So you can get a better modifier on explosive traps, and that it has a short delay on firing after being summoned. Flame burst sentries inflict hellfire instead of on fire, which only applies to the cane and the sentry, so the hard mode versions of the weapons. And it now has a short delay on firing, so I guess you could abuse all of these in some way, I would assume, or this is just an unintentional thing that's on some sentries that they don't want being on them, that you can have this no delay on firing after being summoned. I don't really know, but that's being changed. Ballista towers got a damage increase. Attack delay is reduced, so they shoot faster. Knockback is increased from 4.5 to 4.7, and has the same delay. And the lightning aura only gains 50% of the damage from whip tags due to its high hit rate and armor piercing capabilities. That makes sense. Now as token knockback value, you get better modifiers. Staves now have a more informative tooltip explaining how their damage works, which means that it basically ignores defense, and the stave actually tells you that. Okay. The Frost Hydra Staff got a buff. The projectile now inflicts frostbite. Projectile speed increased by 50%. Now has a short delay on firing after being summoned. So this is just something that is with all of the sentries, which is kind of interesting. That's just being changed now. I wonder if that was just like, is that something that like brought issues to light with the new summoner changes or something? Because obviously, giant summoner overhaul in 1.4. I don't know. It's interesting. Rainbow Crystal Staff got a buff. Projectiles now use static immune frames, so they don't mess with your other damage that much. And the Lunar Portal Staff got a 100% damage increase. Cooldown between beams reduced from 90 to 30. This is fast enough to allow a second beam to begin while the first one is still active, so it shoots faster. Lasers swing faster and cover a wider arc. Because they move so much faster, they may only hit once, where previously a single laser might have hit twice. but the overall increase to firing time is so significant that the total number of hits per second is still higher. So this has been around for a while. I never see this though, the Lunar Portal Staff. I never use it because I'm pretty sure you usually just make the Xeno Staff, right? So I never use the Lunar Portal Staff. So I've barely ever seen this and what it actually does, but it has a lot more damage. It has a faster fire rate and swings faster, covers a wider arc, so it should just be more effective at hitting stuff. But you know, it doesn't usually hit twice where it could before. That should be way better. It's gonna hit 3 times as fast, right? 90 to 30, or is that 2 times? Let's see. Is there a lot of changes in like these other ones? I was thinking about just leaving it at that for tonight and recording the rest of this tomorrow, since I'm just like tired and it's getting late. I've literally been at this for like 4 hours total, I think, just reading through all these changes. I mean, this one might be pretty big, the accessories and stuff, but like, I mean, buffs, debuffs and stuff, and then drop rates, recipes, and miscellaneous stuff should not be as big as the other sections, so we'll take a look. And armor certainly is not, as you can see. Snow armor got a buff, increased the defense of the pieces from 121 to 333. Now as a set bonus, which grants immunity to chilled and frozen. You can mix the pieces and look at the set bonus. The effective drop rate for each piece has been increased from 1 in 150 to 1 in 30, so it's actually realistic to get it, or to get them, and they're much better. I don't actually know how you get these armor pieces. I've never used snow armor, so I don't know, but they're better. The mining set got a buff. The mining helmet defense is increased from 1 to 2. And the mining set's 30% mining speed is now split evenly between the mining shirt, mining pants, and the set bonus, with each giving 10%. I don't think that really makes the mining set useful at all, but I mean, it's better. It's more flexible. The angler set got a buff. Tooltips now show how much fishing power the pieces grant, and it has a set bonus which reduces enemy spawn rates, so that's cool. More peaceful fishing when you're using the angler set, which can certainly be helpful. Like, you know, reducing enemy spawn rates when you're just trying to fish is like nothing but a good thing. The shadow armor got a buff. The set bonus got reworked to provide a more flexible speed increase system similar to Magiluminescence. Unlike Magiluminescence, this works while in the air. Plus 7% melee speed on each piece has been removed and replaced with a 5% universal critical chance. So does that mean you get 15% critical chance? And then you get a set bonus, which it doesn't actually show what it does, but should, similar to Magiluminescence. So that means that the shadow armor is going to, it's going to give you, how do you pronounce, or how do you, not pronounce, how do you say it? It's like, momentum shifts, because that's what Magiluminescence does, right? It allows you to shift your momentum faster and gain momentum in different directions faster. So that's what it's going to do, or at least it's going to do a similar thing, and then it's going to give you 15% critical strike chance. Solid. Shadow armor is probably going to be a lot better. The Crimson armor got a buff. Damage on each piece increased from 2% to 3%, so that's pretty cool. Crimson armor, I think, is kind of just better overall than Shadow armor, or has been, although they should be similarly powered now, I would imagine. The Shadow armor might even be a little better, but most definitely similar powered, since they both will have more flexible bonuses. The Crimson armor was already fine, but the Shadow armor's set should be a little better. And then the Crimson armor just got a buff because it's not the best set for sure, so give it a little buff. The Obsidian armor got a nerf. The whip range bonus reduced from 50% to 30%, and the whip speed bonus reduced from 35% to 15%. Those are like those percentages are fucking huge. Jesus, man. I forgot that Obsidian armor got changed to actually be a summoner set. I did forget that. I remember finding out about that, and then I just, promptly forgot it because I just didn't care. But like, wow, it's like, that's actually that good that they had to nerf those numbers by that much. Or I guess that's not that it was that good, but they overpowered the set bonus a little bit. So hopefully this isn't like too much of a nerf, because they're pretty big number shifts. But since these are so big, they shouldn't be, since you can get obsidian armor pretty easily and pretty early, I think. I mean, relatively, you have to get obsidian first, I would imagine, to get obsidian armor. I don't actually know how to make it either, because I've never made obsidian armor, because I don't care. But yeah, that's what that is. Cobalt armor got a buff. All the defense got increased, so it's just a little bit better. Orichalcum boots now given 8% damage bonus, so that got a buff. Titanium armor got a nerf. Shards can only now generate once every 10 ticks, 1/6 of a second, for a maximum of 6 shards a second. Titanium armor no longer spawns shards from statue spawned enemies. This one I don't have an opinion on because I have not actually used the titanium armor since they changed it in 1.4, but it got changed. It got nerfed from having what the hallowed set now has. It was always better than adamantite because you could dodge attacks with it. They gave it a new bonus, and it apparently, I think it was still like kind of nuts, like it did a lot, so they nerfed it. The hallowed armor got a nerf. Fully protection buff no longer starts its cooldown immediately at the time the buff starts, but instead begins at the 30-second cooldown when you activate the dodge. If you never use the dodge, you can reactivate it immediately after the buff expires. Previously, the Holy Protection buff was activated by attacking an enemy, but it only had a 25% chance to activate. This did not really have any true impact on X1's functionality at all, except to make it slightly inconsistent. So this has been removed. The buff will now be activated 100% of the time as long as you are not on cooldown. That's some interesting changes. Okay. Chlorified armor got a buff. Leaf Crystal's projectile is now an instantaneous bolt of energy, dramatically reducing its likelihood of missing. So that's good. It doesn't just have its slow little leaf projectile that just misses all the time. Now has a distance limit for how far it will fire when triggered by hitting an NPC. Previously, it could be significantly off-screen. That's kind of a nerf, but at the same time, the projectile itself should still just be way better. Tiki armor got a buff. The mask now gives 10% whip range. The Tiki armor set bonus now gives an additional 20% whip range. Shumite armor got a buff. The helmet also applies its bonus to any ranged projectile shooting weapon which is not otherwise included by the gun or bow helmets. This includes weapons such as dart guns, flamethrowers, and star cannons. The category of weapons is being referred to as specialist weapons, so that kind of makes sense since rockets are kind of specialist in this game. Like there's not a main weapon type that's just rockets, because rockets are kind of bad and there's not that many weapons that use them, so that's cool. You can get buffs for your dart guns and flamethrowers and star cannons now, which have all kind of been buffed, which is really cool. It's gonna be cool to use that. The Shumite headpieces had a tooltip display bug, so that got fixed as well. Spectre armor got a buff. The Spectre Hood's teammate healing range increased from 1200 to 3000. That's a big range increase, wow. Furthermore, it is now a circular shape instead of a diamond, further increasing its effective coverage range. Why would you ever make your range of an item in the shape of a diamond? What the fuck, Relogic? What are you doing? That's a good change. Beetle scale armor. The Beetle's might charges last about 33% longer, and it now takes slightly less time and damage to charge up to Beetle's might tier 3. So the damage reduction is charged up faster. Solar armor got a buff. The solar dash and explosion damage now scales with melee damage bonus. I don't know how useful that is overall. The Stardust armor got a buff. The Stardust helmet now gives +1 sentry count, and the Stardust chestplate and leggings now give 15% whip range each. So just better stats. Accessories, mounts, tools, and tiles. Frog legs and all tinkers got a rework. Players can now stack any frog leg derived tinker to gain additive benefits. Jump speed bonus reduced from 48% to 32%, and fall damage protection reduced roughly proportionately to the jump speed bonus. The fall damage protection got reduced, the jump speed bonus got reduced, but you can stack frog leg items to get you just get more frog leg. So if you put on, is there 3 frog leg items? I think there's 3. 3. So if you put on 2 frog leg items, you get 64% jump speed bonus, and then you get 64% fall damage protection. So you put on more of the frog leg items, you get more frog leg, and then you get the other benefits. That's a really weird change. I hope that doesn't mean that they're gonna be like, you know, that much less effective, like as a standalone item, because I love fucking frog gear. I love frog gear. It's like one of my favorite items in the game that they added. Like I loved that friggin' item, dude. Frog gear was so good. So that's what it is. The Squire Shield and Apprentice Scarf got a tier change. Dark Mages in Tier 1 and Tier 3 Old One's Army now drops Squire Shield and Apprentice's Scarf, allowing access to add extra sentry accessories pre-hard mode. The drop rate is 50% to drop one of them in Classic and 100% in Expert and Master. These two items have been removed from the Ogre's drop pool. So, you know, that's an Old One's Army's change, but who cares about the Old One's Army? 5-pack got a buff. Now increases the firing rate of Hornet summons by about 30%, increases the damage of Wasp Gun from 31 to 36, and increases the defense penetration of Wasps from 10 to 15. Hive-Pack may have some use here and there. Magiluminescence, all mobility enhancing stat bonuses are reduced by 25%. That's sad that it got nerfed. Magiluminescence is such a good item, but it's so easy to get, so you know, I get it. I mean, like, you can literally use Magiluminescence into hard mode, which is a bit much. You know, I really liked it how it was, but you know, that's just from someone who loved the item. But objectively, yeah, you know, probably a nerf is perfectly warranted. Spore Sack got a buff. Movement speed of the spores has been dramatically increased, so they move faster, and the range that they start chasing targets has been increased by 20%. The Lucky Horseshoe and Fledgling Wings have had a tier change. Reverted the change that put the Lucky Horseshoe in gold chests and put them back into sky chests on World Gen. Fledgling Wing has been removed as a primary drop from sky chests and now has a 140 chance of being secondary loot. Sky crates have been updated to account for the above changes. Leaf Wings got a tier change. Now sold by the Witch Doctor after Plantera has been defeated, but otherwise under the same conditions. Wing power has been increased to be the same as uncommon pre-Plantera wings. Flame Butterfly being bad. Cost has been increased to 1.5 platinum. I mean, like, they just got nerfed, right? They got nerfed and now they got buffed again, but they're still nerfed from where they were before, right? Because Leaf Wings were just, like, incredible. That's weird. Strange change for Leaf Wings. I don't really know what that really affects, but is what it is. Magic Quiver, Molten Quiver, and Stalker's Quiver. The damage bonus is now additive with other range damage bonuses instead of multiplicative. This will generally result in slightly lower overall damage, especially when you have high quantities of ranged damage bonus. Projectile speed bonus now also increases speed gained from ammo. Previously, it only increased the bow's projectile speed value. I don't really know what that second change does, but the first one is just less damage. So that's whatever. Magic Quiver's always been good. It's probably not going to change that fact. But yeah, nerf. We have a Philosopher's Stone and Charm of Myths rework. Potion sickness reduction is no longer front-loaded at the time of using the potion. Instead, the cooldown is dynamically updated whenever the accessory is equipped. Equipping it will reduce the remaining cooldown proportionately, and removing it will increase the remaining cooldown proportionally. As long as you are wearing it, the effective remaining cooldown is reduced. This means that you will wear it for half of a minute and then remove it. You will only reduce 7.5 seconds from the total cooldown instead of 15. It also means that if you forget to equip it when using a potion, you can still equip it after to reduce the remaining cooldown. So is that what people were using it for? I guess they were like abusing it a bit. You could just use it. You could pop it on, use a potion, and then pop it off, and you'd have a lower potion cooldown. That seems like what I would imagine this change is meant to address, while also having a different sort of effect that also acts kind of like a buff to the item in a way. Volatile Gel got a buff. I think is that the Queen Slime item or something? Projectiles fire further, and with a flatter arc, fire rate is increased from every 50 frames to every 40 frames. Soaring Insignia got a nerf. All mobility enhancing stat bonuses reduced by 25%. The infinite flight has not been changed. The Soaring Insignia, that's from the Empress of Light, isn't it? Infinite Flight thing? Yeah, so it's the Empress of Light. You get Infinite Wing and Rocket Boot Flight and I guess you also did get some sort of other movement speed buffs, so that's what they're changing, and they're not changing the infinite flight, so that's what it is. The Magma Skull and the Molten Skull Rose got a rework. The recipe for both of them take a Lava Charm instead of a Magma Stone. Well, that's fucking annoying, isn't it? Both of these accessories now give temporary lava immunity instead of adding Hellfire to attacks. As cool as that is, maybe because I think I prefer having lava immunity instead of Hellfire. Overall, lava charms are like, I never find them. I hate having to search for the item. It's so annoying. Hellfire treads got a rework. They're no longer crafted by combining Flame Walker and Lava Waders. Instead, is crafted using Flame Waker and Spectre boots. I don't know what Flame Waker is actually. I forgot what those are. I don't know what Hellfire treads are actually. I thought I knew what they were. What the fuck? Loses its lava weighting up benefits, but now has a Hermes running and rocket booting. Generates fire sparks on running and uses the classic flame rocket boot trail. What were Hellfire treads? Like, I never even saw this item, dude. Provides the ability to walk on water, honey, and lava. Grants immunity to fire blocks and 7 seconds of immunity to lava. So that's what it is. So it was just a different kind of boot that they added. The Flame Walker boots are what allowed you to or Flame Waker boots. No, so they're cosmetic. That's why I never heard of these, because the Flame Waker boots are just cosmetic, and you could only get them from crates. Or wait, can you get them from shadow chests, obsidian crates, or hellstone crates? No, you can only get them from crates. That's why I never noticed these when I first started playing. They do nothing except for give you cooler drip, better drip. You have cooler looking shoes. That's weird. So now you can make them from Spectre boots. Why did they make this change? Neither of these are useful. I mean, like, why would you ever make anything except for Terra Spark boots is my real question. If you're gonna go with boots. Seems a little silly to me, but okay. Sure, this is a change that was made. Lava waders can now be crafted with a Molten Skull Rose and Water Walking Boots / Obsidian Water Walking Boots. Fairy Bell got a buff. The Fairy Light Pet movement speed increased from 3.5 to 6, so moves faster. Turtle Mount got a buff. The speed is increased by a bunch. Swim speed increased by 66%. Jump height increased by 20%. Now gives water breathing when underwater. So it's just a lot easier, or it moves a lot better, and that's good because the turtle mount was way too slow for any practical use. The gelatinous pillion, horizontal flight speed reduced by roughly 30%, walking speed reduced by roughly 10%. Why would you nerf a mount? What's the gelatinous pillion? Is that just the I assume that's just the slime mount that you get from the queen slime, right? That's all that I can assume. I don't know. I don't feel like looking that one up. All minecarts got a buff. They hit harder in higher difficulties, deal more knockback, and are generally better at hitting enemies without letting the player be hurt when colliding with enemies, which is good, since it kind of sucks to get hit while you're just riding down a minecart track, right? The Met cart got a rework. Now is the same speed as other minecarts. Does not generate lasers. This will be addressed by a new item, the minecart upgrade kit. What? Huh, that's weird. Okay, maybe you can just turn any minecart into a mech cart and shoot lasers out of it. Minecart upgrade kit. That's kind of funny. Well, that'll be a thing in the future, I guess. The drill mount can now break walls. Right click. That doesn't mean anything. The dig speed is roughly 3% faster. I never saw this drill mount, so is what it is. The Spectre pickaxe. The mining speed got reduced from 10 to 8. So it mines faster. The drills got a buff. All drills that already had no knockback and now have a token amount of knockback for better modifiers, so you can get legendary on them, I assume. The grand design now takes a mechanical ruler in its recipe instead of the ruler. This also means that having the grand design in the inventory enables the laser grid UI option, so slightly harder to get item, I assume. And then you have another option overall in the grand design. So that's cool. I really do enjoy having the grand design on me. It's one of my favorite items. The Magic Conch and Demon Conch, their animation sequence is now as fast as the Magic Mirror instead of being slower. That's a buff. I didn't know the Demon Conch was an item. I assume it does the same thing though, since they're listed together. cool. The Bottomless Water Bucket and the Super Absorbent Sponge can now be obtained in pre-hard mode from Angler quests as soon as you've completed 10 quests. The Bottomless Water Bucket specifically is guaranteed to drop at 25 quests. So that's cool. You can get that in pre-hard mode since there's no reason it should be confined to hard mode since it's just like a quality of life item in general, right? The Enchanted Sundial now glows when it's charged, so you can tell when it's charged, which is nice. It'll instantly become charged if a natural blood moon or eclipse begins. It can now be triggered via wire. It's an interesting change. Pylons got a buff, increase the maximum range where pylons are usable from. It should be impossible to be in range by opening. It should be impossible to be in range of opening a pylon and not be able to teleport with it. Yeah, that should be impossible. You can use pylons during the Moonlord summoning sequence. The snowball launcher got a buff. It no longer requires ammo, which is, I guess, useful. The firing cooldown is reduced from 10 to 7 frames, and it has a better projectile range and arc. The snowball launcher isn't even a bad item. Or is that the snowball cannon I'm thinking about? Yeah, the snowball launcher is the one that you sit on the ground. So, not useful. Makes sense that would not need ammo, because it's not useful. But it shoots faster, so you can have more fun with it, I suppose. Star in a Bottle got a buff. I didn't realize that gave you a buff at all. Like, the item gave you a buff. The mana regeneration bonus is increased from 1 mana per second to 5 mana per second. It also reduces the cooldown before mana begins regenerating. After using magic weapons slightly, I just said regenerating like I'm a fucking, I don't know. Where do people say that? Where do people cut off words like that? I don't know. I don't know. The class buff stations. The sharpening station, crystal ball, ammo box, bewitching table will now last until death / being canceled or quitting out rather than having a time limit. I love that change. That is an awesome change. I love that because it's something I will always forget to reapply the class buff stations. I love that. Really good one. The ammo box is now sold by the arms dealer in hard mode. It's no longer sold by the traveling merchant, so that makes it easier to get, which is good since the other class buff stations are easier to get, so makes sense to make that one a little easier to get. And the cost was reduced. The War Table, it's now a buff station that grants a +1 summon sentry cap buff. So I guess that's kind of cool. Not usually applicable unless you really like your sentries or you're doing the old one's army, but gives the War Table an actual use, which is cool. Poison. The version of poison inflicted on enemies now does 6 DPS instead of 2. So that's a big buff, especially for like early game weapons that inflict poison. On Fire and Frostburn. The majority of hard mode obtained items which inflict on fire or frostburn have been changed to inflict hellfire and frostbite respectively. These changes are listed in their respective weapons if they have a changelog entry, but included here also for visibility, which we've already read all of those. And the glossary note, Hellfire and Frostbite are upgraded versions of On Fire and Frostburn. They behave entirely identically, but they deal more damage. They can also be stacked with their weaker versions, though this rarely adds up to much extra damage, because On Fire and Frostburn kind of suck at the point that you can get Hellfire and Frostbite, right? Crate potions are increased from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. The potency is increased by 50%, so that's pretty cool. Crate potions didn't ever really seem to give you that much of an increase, and they did not last that long ever. So I'm glad that those have gotten buffed. That's just a very nice thing for when you do a lot of fishing, like I do like to do on when I'm actually really into Terraria and playing the game a lot. Warmth potions got a buff. Now include contact damage protection against ice bats, ice tortoises, ice mimics, and yetis. What the hell are yetis? I don't remember that being a monster in this game. Calming potions. The potency of spawn reduction effect increased by 33%. Duration increased from 8 to 12 minutes. That's just fair. The calming potion should just be something you pop on and mobs just are not spawning. And it should last like basically as long as you want. So, cool buff. Inferno potion got a buff. The damage is increased from 10 to 20. It now inflicts hellfire instead of on fire. That's good because the Inferno is just like, it's kind of a potion where you just can end up taking because there's no other potion that does what it does. So you may as well take it, but it doesn't actually do anything like later in the game. So I'm glad that they're giving that a buff. Luck potions got a buff. Duration and potency thresholds of all luck potions increased from 3, 5, and 10. The luck potions are weird. I don't know what to say about this buff since I never looked into luck that much myself. But they got a buff. They did in fact get a buff. Spelunker potions, statues and paintings now glow when this potion is active, so that's a buff, I guess. It's not really a buff for me because I don't care about statues or paintings. Like, come on, dude, who cares about that stuff? Bottled honey got a buff, which in addition to healing, also grants 15 seconds of the honey buff. That's actually rather interesting and might have some applications now. Because, I mean, bottled honey is strictly worse than standard healing potions, because they heal 80 and standard healing potions heal 100. But getting the honey buff might actually warrant some use in some cases where you just don't want to set up a honey in your arena, or for some other reason you can't get honey. I don't know. But, that's not a bad buff to the item since people never use it. Strange Brew got reworked. It now heals randomly between 70 and 120 health. The potion sickness is now variable between 40 and 70 seconds, may randomly give a period of damage and vulnerability, with longer durations being possible rarely. No longer heals mana at all. What the fuck did... What? Okay, I guess. That's bizarre, dude. They nerfed the Froggle Bun Witch for some reason. The duration got reduced to 6 minutes. The Seafood Dinner got nerfed, bro. Reduced from tier 3 with a 4-minute duration to tier 2 with a 14-minute duration. No, bro. Seafood Dinner was awesome. God damn it. I know it was like super, it was like the super easiest way to get tier 3 food buff, but God, it's so good. Don't nerf my Seafood Dinner, man. Fuck. Well. Grub Soup got a buff. Duration increased from 10 to 14. Potato Chips from 18 to 25. Carton of Milk from 15 to 20. Hot Dog changed from tier 2 with a 20-minute duration to tier 3 with a 12-minute duration. So that's still kind of an insane item, but you have to get it. You can't make that. You have to, get it from enemy drops, I think. That's how you get the hot dog. The Traveling Merchant Shop has extra guaranteed item slot in his inventory in hard mode. We've already read this. Does this have anything useful in it? The Celestial Magnet is also not sold by the Traveling Merchant. We already went over the ammo box. Pad Thai has been increased from tier 1 to tier 2, making it less common. Foe has been increased from tier 1 to tier 3, making it less common. Christmas paintings can now be sold anytime after the Frost Legion has been defeated, rather than only when Christmas season is active. And both Zappinators have been reduced from tier 5 to tier 3, making them more common. That's weird. They didn't do anything to the Zappinators, but I guess they're just kind of useless anyways, so why not reduce their tier? The Celestial Magnet got a re-tier. You can find it in the primary random loot pool of Sky Chests and Sky Crates. So that's pretty cool. You can get a Celestial Magnet more frequently, since it used to just be like RNG, like you had to get it from the merchant, or the Traveling Merchant, right? Paintings, I don't care about the Waldo paintings. Wooden chest primary loot got buffs. Throwing daggers and glow sticks are not primary loot. The primary loot pool size changed from 12 to 10. The items are now secondary loot, so you get better loot more consistently, I think is what that is mostly. The Skeleton Merchant can now sell most of the remaining wooden chest primary loot on a rotating moon cycle schedule. Every day of the lunar cycle, he will have a new item. That's kind of weird, but I suppose convenient if you need those items. Living tree chests, you get more chances of getting a minecart. If you get one, it's still a 50/50 chance to be a sunflower or ladybug minecart. Mushroom biome chests are guaranteed to have an exclusive drop. That's pretty nice, since you kind of want an exclusive drop from a mushroom chest if you get one. Like, it'd be nice to have. Treasure Magnet, instead of being primary loot, is a 1 in 5 chance to be secondary loot in shadow chests and obsidian lockboxes. There's a Monocal card, can be found in lava crates as an uncommon loot bonus. The Shark Bait, instead of being a primary loot, is 1 in 10 chance of secondary loot in water chests and ocean crates. Tree Fruit got a buff, and these are buffs, I think, because it basically means that you're more likely to come across them, because you get your primary loot, and then all the secondary loot is there as well, and there's more chances because there's more secondary loot than just like primary loot. I think I don't know. I don't know exactly what this means, but that's what I'm imagining. Tree fruit. You get higher chance of getting a tree fruit. Diving helmet, drop rate increase. Pocket mirror, drop rate increase. Medusa's head, drop rate increase. Turtle shells, drop rate increase. Brain scrambler, deadly sphere, fire feather, bone feather, giant harpy feather, tattered bee wing, obsidian rose, frozen turtle shell, icicle. All drop rate increase. The monster meat got a drop rate decrease for some reason. I guess, sure. From 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 1,500, and then 1 in 200 to 1 in 500 on Don't Starve seeds. Flink's fur got a buff. The drop rate is an overall increase. What the hell do they do to the Eater world in the Brand of Cthulhu? What? They nerfed it. Whatever the hell it's supposed to be. A drop rate, I assume. Brand of Cthulhu overall drop rate of Crimtane ore and tissue sample in Expert and Master has been reduced significantly, as it was dropping almost twice as much as it should have been, and now drops roughly as much as the Eater Worlds drops. That's weird, and I didn't know that. Restructured how ore and tissue sample shadow scale drops are handled in Expert and Master. Overall, the quantity of drops from creepers and segment kills has been reduced, while the amount of drops from treasure bags has been increased. In Expert mode, the total quantity of drops is split roughly evenly, with 50% of the ore samples and scales coming from the partial kills and 50% coming from treasure bags. In Master mode, it's weighed more heavily towards the treasure bag, with only 25% of the rewards coming from partial kills and 75% coming from treasure bags. Normal mode drop rates and weighting has been left entirely untouched by all of these changes. Okay. Very rare pirate drops. They have all had their drop rates doubled. The increased drop rate from the pirate captains has also been doubled. The Flying Dutchman also has a substantially increased chance of dropping the items, with a 1 in 15 chance to drop any of them except for the coin gun, which has a 1 in 50 chance. That's very nice because, as I'm sure anyone who plays this game knows, the rare pirate drops are such a pain to get, and I fucking hate them. Golden Furniture got a buff. Flying Dutchman is guaranteed to drop 1 piece of golden furniture, so that's a buff for golden furniture, I guess, as a category of item. And the stack size of dropped golden platforms has been increased as well, so that's cool. Reindeer bells, the drop rate from the Ice Queens has been doubled. Lava crates got a nerf, they're now slightly less common. However, with the buff to crate potions, they'll be roughly the same as before when using a crate potion, so that's fair. Biome crates, the game will prioritize getting a biome crate instead of a gold crate when in the relatively rare circumstances that you are eligible for both. Actual odds of getting either are unchanged by this. Wooden crates got a buff. The drop rate for the wooden chest primary loot increased from 1 in 45 to 1 in 20, which is nice. I know that that's been annoying before. Umbrella is replaced by the step stool in the wooden chest loot pool. The fishing crate ore nerf. Drop rate of ore and ore bars from fishing crates has been reduced. Ore crates or wooden crates have 40% less ore, iron and biome crates 30%, gold crates 20%. Gold and titanium crates got a buff. Drop rate of life crystals increased from 1 in 15 to 1 in 8. And the drop of enchanted swords from gold crates have increased from 1 in 50 to 30. In titanium crates, it's been further increased to 1 in 15. Oasis and Mirage crates got a buff. They now have a very rare chance to drop a sandstorm in a bottle as bonus loot. Pharaoh Vanity Set. Pharaoh Set is now less common from pyramid chests, increasing relative frequency of other drops. Thank God, because sandstorm in a bottle and the magic carpet are so much better than this stupid fucking Vanity Set. Why would you ever want that? Golden Worms got a buff. When used for fishing, it has a particularly low chance of being consumed, only a 1 in 20 chance. So that's cool. Old One's Army Ogre weapons increase the odds that the Tier 2 Ogre will drop a weapon from 33% to 50%. In Expert and Master mode, this has been increased from 50% to 100%. Tier 3 Ogres also have a higher chance of dropping weapons, up from 1 in 6 to 1 in 4. How much more is there? Holy shit, I need to fucking go eat. Okay, there's not that much more. Oh my god, please make it stop. I've been recording for 2 hours, and that's on top of the other recordings that I had to cut because I had to go eat and stuff. I eat other thing. I went and ate cake because it's like my sister's birthday. I didn't actually eat dinner yet because there wasn't anything for me to eat earlier, and I was like, what the fuck do I cook? And then I still gotta figure it out. Oh my god. Dev armor from treasure bags. Slightly increased chance of getting them. Frost daggerfish, you can get more frost daggerfish per pull. Seahorses can now spawn in a wider variety of ocean shapes and conditions, which will result in more consistent spawning. Why do we need more seahorses? Gem bunnies and squirrels. Gem critters spawns now have a rarity system based on their gem. That's fun. Water Striders got a buff. Spawn rate increased. Increased the maximum level of windiness that will allow Water Striders to spawn from 10 mph to 20 mph. What? Butterfly days. Increase the odds of having a butterfly day because why not? Treasure Fairies got a nerf. The spawn rate is increased or reduced by 2/3 in hard mode. Truffle Worm and Prismatic Lacewing. Spawn rates are now impacted by luck. So that's a buff. So you can get them more often by luck. Okay, that's cool. Jungle Critters got a nerf. Overall spawn rate of jungle critters in jungle towns reduced. Only in jungle towns? Why? Why is that? Why? So it doesn't matter in like anywhere outside of towns. You can still get like just as many jungle critters anywhere else, which is all I really care about. I don't care about the towns. Bloody Tears got a buff. Brides and grooms that spawn in graveyards can now drop Bloody Tears, even if it isn't a blood moon. So you can get Bloody Tears outside of a blood moon, which is cool. Because what if a blood moon never happens? Now you have a way to make it happen. Teleporters are now sold by the mechanic pre-hard mode instead of being sold by the steampunker. I guess there's no reason for it to be sold in hard mode, so why not? Digging Mole Cart will now be sold by the zoologist at 35% bestiary completion instead of 60%. The Bast statue can now generate as furniture in underground desert cabins, in addition to being found in chests. It's cool for the Bast statue, although I got too many of those. Regardless, whenever I was exploring the underground desert, like ever when I was playing 1.4, so I don't care about that change. Recipes and prices. Let's see. Crafting costs of Celestial Sigil reduced from 20 of each fragment to 12. That's nice for fighting more Moonlords. You can craft Sandstorm and Blizzard in a bottle using Cloud in a bottle and a Frost Core, and a Forbidden Fragment at a Crystal Ball. Frost Core or a Forbidden Fragment. That's nice that there's a crafting recipe for them now. Although they're not that useful at that point in the game that you can get those items, but just it being in the game at all is cool. Molotov Cocktail now uses regular gel instead of pink gel. Very nice because pink gel is pretty rare. You can now use vertebrae instead of worm teeth to craft unholy arrows. Thorns potions no longer require worm teeth or stingers to craft. Angel and demon wings, souls of light and night cost reduced from 25 to 15. Empty bucket, iron and lead bar cost reduced from 3 to 12 or 3 to 12, 3 to 2. I said 12. I can't speak because I'm hungry and I'm tired and I gotta go to bed and eat and like, oh my god. Change the recipes of all ore-based bricks to have a 1 in 5 crafting ratio. Well, where previously they had a 1 in 1 ratio. Makes sense. So you can get more of the bricks. That's nice, just for building purposes. Shumite plating's recipe changed from this ratio. You can pause it and look at it if you want. I don't care. Pearlstone bricks recipe changed to be consistent with Evanstone brick, using 2 pearlstone blocks instead of 1 pearlstone block and 1 pearl sand. Coral torches recipe now takes 3 torches and gives 3 coral torches per coral instead of 1 torch. Yeah, that makes more sense. Why would you get 1 torch for making something with 3 torches? Chains recipe now gives 15 chains instead of 10. Any 2 Salamander, Shelly, Crawdad trios banners can be used to craft the banner of the missing member of the trio. Okay, for whatever the hell you would ever use that for, that's kind of cool. The wormhole potion recipe takes 3 bottled waters and gives 3 wormhole potions, where it only gave like 1 before, I guess. I don't know, I've never made wormhole potions. The Tavern Keeper now gives 10 medals when initially spoken to, allowing players to purchase 2 tier 1 stays instead of 1. That's cool. The tier 2 Old One's Army armor pieces are reduced from 25 to 15 medals. Tier 3, 75 to 50. Tier 2 sentries reduced from 25 to 15. And tier 3 sentries reduced from 100 to 60. And the Defender's Forge got reduced from 75 to 50 medals. So you don't have to grind the Old One's Army as much, which is a blessing because Why would you ever want to do that? The purchase cost of Pad Thai and Pho got increased. Sailor Vanity, Eye Patch, and Mummy Vanity, Pharaoh Vanity, Grinch, Whistle, Mana Crystals, Ancient Manipulator, and Shell Piles all now have a sell value, reducing the sell value and subsequently the reforge cost of a number of 1.4 tinkers and accessories which had higher than typical sell values. The cost of wallpapers got reduced from 1 silver to 75 copper. Cost of contaminator solutions have been reduced from 25 silver to 15 silver. Tax collector can now hold up to a base 25 gold instead of 10. This can be further boosted by happiness, so you get more gold from your tax collector. The sell value of frogs is reduced from 15 to 10 silver. Their food recipe sell values have also been reduced proportionately. Why did they reduce the sell value of frogs? Like, why did they do that? Angler quests now gives 2 times as much money in hard mode. Research cost of red potion reduced from 10 to 3. Red potion? I don't even know what that is. It must just be that fucking, like, not useful. And then miscellaneous. The last few things. Summoning Moonlord with Celestial Sigil will only have a 12-second summoning time instead of 60 seconds. That is very nice, actually, because waiting that 60 seconds can be a pain in the ass. It's like annoying. It's like, just get over here already. I want to bite you, right? The Old One's army banners now apply banner buff to their respective enemies, though it is much weaker than the normal banner buff. Banners from particularly rare enemies may now drop at 10 or 25 kills instead of 50. This same value will apply to how many kills it takes to complete their bestiary page. Wire in the temple cannot be cut by the player until Golem is defeated. That's interesting. The player cannot see wires within the temple until Golem is defeated. That is also interesting, but you can still break the traps. I guess it just makes it way easier. I mean, that's all that I do, right? When I have the is it the grand plan? That's not right. The grand design, that's what it's called. When I have the grand design, that's what I do. I can see the wires because I have the grand design, and then I just cut the wires in the temple from like outside of the rooms. So I guess that makes sense for making the temple a little more difficult to maneuver. You can still just find the traps and break them, so it's still pretty easy, but a little less easy. And, you know, I can respect that change. NPCs who die will now respawn freely, ignoring the original unique conditions which were required to spawn in the first place. For example, Party Girl will have normal respawn odds instead of her rare respawn chance, and NPCs with a required item like Arms Dealer and Demolitionist will no longer require a player to be holding that item to respawn. Good change. It just doesn't make sense that they would have to do that in the first place from like just a, you know, quality of life perspective. Life crystals are now lower priority on the metal detector than hard mode ores. Yeah, that makes sense. Chlorophyte ore infection protection is now slightly stronger. It can also purify a wider selection of infected tiles, such as sand and sandstone. Strange plants now give 6 times the die when turned in instead of 3 times. That's nice. That's because I hate getting only 3 times the die and needing like way more than that. I do appreciate that. Slightly reduced the quantity of cracked bricks in the dungeon. Merchant and Skeleton Merchant now both sell regular potions in hard mode in addition to their lesser potions. All minecart track items are now immune to lava destruction. What does that mean? Is there other minecart track items other than minecart tracks? Whatever, they're immune to lava destruction. Chain tiles are now immune to lava destruction. Stacks of cloud blocks can now be found in skyware chests and sky crates. That's cool. You can just get those without having to actually like mine out an island. When fishing in a hallowed oasis, you can now obtain both hallowed or oasis fish. The same rule does not apply to the more invasive corruption in Crimson. Fairy glowstick now has a stronger light closer to regular glowsticks. The snake coil grows substantially faster than before, and maximum height is increased from 100 or 80 to 100 blocks. The snake coil, I'm pretty sure, is one of the desert items that like makes a snake rope, right? It puts a pot on the ground and makes a snake rope, I think. And placing sunflowers is now auto swing, and that is our final change in the balance changes. Holy shit. That was over 3 hours of balance changes. So the video is probably gonna end up being like at least 3 hours and maybe more. Anyone who watches the whole thing, I mean, kudos. You probably won't. I don't think anybody will unless this video gets a, shitload of views for some reason. I don't know why anyone would watch it. Like, I don't know why that many people would watch it, since it's literally just me going over the text of the changes, right? And I'm gonna do my best, like I said, to timestamp all of this, so you can just go to each weapon type and then each different kind of what do you call it, balance change archetype, I guess. I know I've sort of fallen off like halfway through the video, but that's kind of what has to happen, right? When you're doing things like this, like you can't stay entertaining and energetic for more than like an hour or like an hour and a half, unless you're some special kind of person who can just do that. I cannot do that. I become well, first of all, I can't even speak great after that time because, my throat starts hurting and then my brain starts going out. That's what happens to your brain, right? When you use it too much, it just starts going out and stops working. That's just me. Maybe it's just me. Anyways, that's gonna be all for the video. It's a crazy long video. Thanks for anyone who actually watched it all, honestly, and checked out the end. I would appreciate, I do appreciate anyone who watches this, because I just wanted to get a feel for everything that they wanted to do in the changes, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go through everything and I'm gonna make a video about it, because I just want to get the information out there. And honestly, I mean, I would love some discussion about some of the stuff, and I want to know what people are interested in seeing. And in order to know what they're interested in seeing, I have to go through all of it. I mean, I don't have to go through all of it. Not all of it is super relevant, but if I'm going to go through some of it, I may as well go through all of it, in my opinion. Right? And not make like 4 videos on all of the stuff that they're doing here. So yeah, and like I just said, if there's certain things you want me to check out, please leave it in the comments. I would like to take suggestions. There's going to be a lot of stuff I'm going to look back and try to figure out myself, like what would be interesting and what I would like to see. But if there's any like, weapons, items, or specific like mechanics changes or anything that you would like to see checked out, then I'd be happy to do a video about it. No one ever gives me suggestions for stuff, so you can tell by the lack of content on my channel. Like, I post every like week max. That I'm not especially motivated as far as content goes. So any boost helps. But that'll be the end of this slog of a video. Hopefully you did enjoy, and I shall see you in the next one.